At 10:52 p.m. at our neighborhood flower party, I felt a surge of anger when I saw my wife's close friend harassing a woman for the third time. My wife didn't believe me. She snapped, "Don't embarrass me," and forced me to apologize to him. I was stunned. She trusted a stranger over her own husband, but everything changed when my daughter found the evidence. The truth was something had been going on between them for a long time, and that night wasn't an accident. It was a trap carefully set, waiting for me to walk right into it. Thank you for listening. Before we start, drop a comment for me. Have you ever had to fight back when everyone thought you should give up? Just yes or no. I read everyone. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling, the heart of this story. The lesson is what I hope stays with you. I watched a man's hand linger too long on a woman's shoulder for the third time that evening. The November flower party filled the restaurant banquet hall with the smell of white roses and champagne someone else had paid for. I had spent 31 years as a state vehicle inspector, and you learn to spot trouble by watching small details most people miss. Brent Ramsey, 48, real estate salesman with a practiced laugh and a way of making every conversation sound like he was doing you a favor, had positioned himself next to Angela Foster's chair for the past 20 minutes. Angela, a quiet woman in her early 40s who lived 3 streets over, shifted uncomfortably each time his hand found her shoulder. Once might be accidental, twice might be friendly, 3 times was deliberate. I stood up. "That's the third time tonight," I said loud enough that the conversation at our table stopped. "Keep your hands to yourself." Brent pulled his hand back like he'd touched a hot engine block, but his smile never wavered. "Hey Les, we're all friends here, just being social." "Be social with your own space." The room went quiet in the way rooms do, when someone breaks an unspoken rule about keeping things polite. 6 people at the surrounding tables turned to look. My wife Gail, 60 years old, with 20 years of practice professional smiles from managing a dental office, sat beside me with a champagne flute she hadn't touched. Her face went pale. Then Roxanne Fleming moved. Roxanne, 52, HOA event coordinator whose voice could carry across any room, had organized the annual flower party for the past 6 years. She stepped toward Angela with concern drawn across her face like stage makeup. "Are you okay, honey?" Roxanne asked Angela, but she was looking at me, not Brent. Me. Angela blinked. Yes, I'm fine." "You're sure?" Roxanne touched Angela's arm, her voice gentle and loud. At the same time, the kind of performance that made everyone nearby lean in to hear. "You don't have to say you're fine if you're not comfortable." I realized what was happening half a second too late. The room's attention had shifted. I wasn't the man who'd stopped inappropriate behavior. I was the man who'd made a scene, who'd raised his voice, who'd upset a woman at a nice party. Gail's hand closed around my wrist. "Sit down." I sat. Near the hallway corner, I noticed Serena Cooper, 34 security freelancer, working the restaurant that evening, standing exactly where the hallway camera had the best angle on our table. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was watching. The conversations restarted like someone had turned the volume back up. Brent moved to a different table. Angela excused herself to the restroom. Roxanne patted my shoulder as she walked past, the kind of sympathetic touch you'd give someone who'd embarrassed themselves. Gail didn't say a word. We left 20 minutes later. I held the truck door open for her, same as I had for 32 years. She climbed into the dark blue Ford F250 without looking at me. The drive home took 30 minutes on I-75 northbound from Marietta. Light rain started around the highway interchange, the kind that made the windshield wipers squeak every third pass. I had spent 31 years checking calibrations, torque specs, tire pressure, frame alignment. The room's calibration had been wrong back at that party. I was the only one who could see it. Gail stared out the passenger window at the wet highway lights streaking past. "That woman needed help," I said. Silence. Brent was out of line. More silence. I tried again. Someone had to say something. Nothing. Silence has a weight. 30 minutes of it in a truck cab feels like 30 years. We were 2 miles from home when she finally spoke. "You always have to make a scene, don't you?" Not a question. An accusation. Flat and final, like she'd been rehearsing it for the past half hour. "I didn't make a scene. I stopped one." "You embarrassed me. I protected someone." "You made everything about you." Her voice was cold in a way I hadn't heard before. "Like you always do." I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. We'd been married 32 years. I knew when an argument was a door that only opened one way. I pulled into our driveway at 11:53. The porch light was on the timer, same as always. The garage door opener hummed, same as always. But something felt different in a way I couldn't name yet. Gail's phone lit up on her lap as we sat in the parked truck. Just a flash of blue light in the dark cab. A notification preview on the lock screen. I wasn't trying to read it, but I was sitting 2 feet away and the sender name was right there in white letters. Old Bear. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Old Bear was the nickname I'd given myself 27 years ago when Gail and I first married, and I was trying to be charming about the age gap. She used to laugh and call me that when we were alone. It was our private joke, the kind of small intimacy couples build over decades. I hadn't heard her use it in 15 years. I'd forgotten it existed. Someone else was using it now. Gail swiped the notification away before the preview text appeared too fast for me to see anything else. She grabbed her purse and climbed out of the truck without waiting for me to come around and open her door. I sat in the dark garage with the engine ticking as it cooled. I had inspected over 4,000 vehicles in my career. I knew what a crack in the frame looked like before the owner did. You learn to spot the signs, a stress fracture that starts small, invisible to the untrained eye, but grows under pressure until the whole structure fails. That night, driving home in the rain, I felt the first crack. I just didn't know yet how deep it went. The printed sheet of paper appeared on the kitchen table Sunday morning while the coffee was still brewing. I came downstairs at 7:15. Gail was already dressed, standing by the counter with her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. The crack I'd felt the night before hadn't closed. It had widened. The paper sat in the exact center of the table. White printer paper typed text in clean sans serif font. A list of names and phone numbers formatted like an incident report. Gail didn't look at me. You need to call each of them and apologize, starting with Brent. I picked up the sheet. 6 names, 6 numbers. At the top, a header in bold required contact list, November 16th, 2025. Below that, numbered instructions: 1. Contact each individual listed. 2. Acknowledge inappropriate conduct. 3. Express understanding of impact. 4. Request opportunity to rebuild trust. Inappropriate conduct, I said. Hostile behavior. These aren't your words. Gail's jaw tightened. Does it matter whose words they are? It matters that someone wrote this before I came home last night. I set the paper down while I was still at that restaurant. You embarrassed me. This is how you fix it. I looked at the list again. Brent Ramsey at the top, Roxanne Fleming second, Angela Foster third. 3 more names from the party, all with phone numbers I'd never needed before. The language was wrong. Gail managed a dental office. She could write professional emails, but this wasn't professional. This was legal. HR documentation. The kind of template someone creates when they're building a paper trail. Someone had written this list before I came home from the party. Preparation takes time. This had time built into it. The party ended at 11:30. This document existed by 7:30 the next morning. 8 hours, or it had been ready before the party even started. I folded the paper and put it in my shirt pocket. All right, I said. I'll make the calls. Gail's shoulders dropped half an inch. Relief visible and immediate. She'd expected resistance, prepared for an argument. My agreement surprised her, and in that half second of visible surprise, I learned something she was following instructions too. When? She asked. Today, this afternoon. She nodded and left the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the bedroom door closing, the shower starting. I stood at the counter staring at the refrigerator magnets arranged in a perfect grid. Everything in our house had a place. Someone was building a new pattern around me. I just couldn't see the shape yet. Gail left at noon to visit a friend in Kennesaw. She didn't say which friend. I didn't ask. I drove to the garage. Hewitt's Auto Garage sat on a commercial lot I'd owned for 19 years. The smell hit me when I unlocked the side door. Motor oil, brake fluid, the sharp tang of electrical work. Sunlight came through the high windows and dusty columns. Holden Cruz, 19 apprentice mechanic with a natural understanding of camera systems and motion filtering, was working overtime in Bay 3. He didn't look up from the alternator he was testing. Didn't know you were coming in today, sir. Neither did I. I walked to the small office in the back corner. My desk faced the security monitor, a split screen showing 6 camera angles. I'd installed the system 8 years ago after a break-in. Standard stuff. Motion detection cloud, backup, 30-day rolling storage. My hand reached for the mouse before my brain caught up. I pulled up Friday's footage. 3 days ago. I didn't know why. The timeline scrubber showed 6 feeds, and I scrolled backward from midnight, watching cars come and go and fast forward, watching Holden close up at 6, watching the afternoon appointments, watching. I stopped. 2:15 p.m. Friday afternoon, a silver Lexus sedan pulled into the lot, parked near Bay 1, sat there for 2 minutes and 17 seconds, then left. Brent Ramsey's car. I'd seen it in the restaurant parking lot last night. Same vehicle, same license plate prefix. Friday afternoon, 2:15. Gail had been at work. The dental clinic didn't close until 5. I'd been in Bay 2 doing an emissions inspection with the radio on. I hadn't seen the Lexus, hadn't heard it. Brent had been here, at my garage, during work hours, for 2 minutes. Why was I saving this file? I didn't have an answer yet. But 31 years of inspection work had taught me, save first, understand later. Holden, I called. He appeared in the office doorway, wiping grease off his hands with a red shop rag. Show me how to filter by motion detection. He leaned over my shoulder and clicked through 3 menus, setting parameters for vehicle entry and exit timestamps. You looking for something specific? Just learning the system better. He showed me how to export files, how to tag clips, how to search by date range. Then he went back to Bay 3 without asking more questions. Good kid. His father had worked with me years ago before a bad business deal killed his company. Holden had his father's instinct for when to let silence do its job. I saved the file. Friday, 2:15 p.m. Silver Lexus, 2 minutes, 17 seconds. I labeled it Visitor Log, November 13th, and stored it in a folder I named MISC. Maybe it was normal. Maybe Brent had stopped by looking for an inspection appointment. Maybe he'd changed his mind and left. But I saved the file anyway. I saved the file. I didn't know why yet. That's the thing about being an inspector for 31 years. You develop a reflex for saving things before you understand why they matter. A cracked strut mount doesn't fail immediately. It fails later under load when the stress finds the weakness. You document it first. You prove it existed. Then you wait to see what breaks. I picked up the landline in my office Monday morning and dialed the first name on Gail's list. The file I'd saved Sunday afternoon sat in a folder labeled MISC on my computer. I hadn't opened it again. Hadn't needed to. The reflex to preserve evidence was one thing. Understanding what the evidence meant was something else. Brent Ramsey answered on the second ring. Brent, this is Les Hewitt. I wanted to call and clear the air about Saturday night. Silence on the line. Not long. Maybe 3 seconds. But long enough to tell me he'd been expecting this call. Hey Les, yeah, appreciate you reaching out. I kept my voice calm. Professional. The tone I used with customers when I had to explain why their inspection failed. I was out of line, raising my voice at the party. I apologize for that. Water under the bridge, man. We all have our moments. I hope I didn't interrupt anything important between you two. 2 seconds of silence. Then between me and who? Wrong answer. The right answer would have been immediate. Would have been Angela's name or a confused question about what I meant by interrupting. The right answer would have acknowledged the woman he'd been touching, the woman I'd been protecting. Brent Ramsey didn't give the right answer. He gave the answer of a man who had to think about which you too I meant, which meant there was more than one possibility in his mind. Angela, I said, I hope my reaction didn't make things awkward for you. Oh, right, yeah, no, Angela's fine. She's totally fine. We're all good. I wrote in the inspection log I kept on my desk, Brent knows too much or doesn't know enough. Both wrong. We ended the call with the kind of empty pleasantries men use when they're both pretending a conversation went better than it did. I set the phone down and stared at what I'd written. Between me and who? He'd been thinking of someone else, not the woman at the party. Someone else he thought I might have interrupted something with. Someone whose interaction with him might have been important enough that my confrontation could have disrupted it. I had learned interrogation from 31 years of listening to engines that lied. Ask the question that sounds helpful. Wait for the answer that tells the truth. A transmission doesn't tell you it's failing. It shows you in the way it hesitates between gears in the half-second delay that shouldn't exist. Brent's hesitation was a transmission slipping. I made the rest of the calls on Gail's list. Roxanne Fleming accepted my apology with practiced grace and a reminder that community harmony mattered more than pride. Angela Foster said she appreciated the call and that she hoped I understood how my reaction had made her uncomfortable. Someone had coached her on that line. The others were variations on the same theme: polite acceptance, subtle redirection of fault. The kind of coordinated response that comes from people who've discussed their talking points. By noon, I'd completed the list. Gail would be pleased. I didn't tell her about the notes I'd taken during each call. That night at 8:15, my daughter called. Ilara was 26, a compliance officer for a financial services firm in Charlotte, trained to spot documentation patterns that didn't match the story they were supposed to support. She had her mother's sharp eyes and my habit of asking the question nobody else thought to ask. Grandma called me, she said without preamble, told me about the party. It was a misunderstanding. Dad who sent Mom that list. I sat in the old brown leather armchair in our living room, the reading lamp casting yellow light across the phone in my hand. What list? The apology list. The one with the names and numbers and the formatted instructions. Who sent it to her? I hadn't thought of that question. The list had appeared on the kitchen table. I'd assumed Gail created it, or someone had told her what to write, but Alara was asking something different. Who sent it? I don't know, I said. That list has a format I've seen before. HR Incident Documentation Template. Pre-built structure for workplace conflicts. Someone prepared that before the party ended, and it wasn't Mom. She would have used different language. So who gave it to her? I could hear keyboard clicks in the background. She was typing while we talked. I don't know, I said again. I'm catching Friday's first flight. I'll be there by noon. Ilara, you don't need to. Have you made the calls yet? This morning, all of them. Did anyone's response feel rehearsed? I looked at the notepad on the side table where I'd written observations from each conversation. Most of them. Coordinated responses mean coordinated preparation. Did anyone say something that didn't match the script? My daughter was 26 years old. Somewhere between teaching her to ride a bicycle and teaching her to drive my truck, she had become smarter than me. Brent? I said. I asked if I'd interrupted anything important between him and Angela. He said between me and who, like he had to think about which person I meant. The keyboard clicks stopped. Dad, that's not someone covering for inappropriate behavior. That's someone who has multiple relationships he's trying to keep separate. I know. I'm not asking if you're okay. I'm asking if you need help building a timeline. Hey, Lara, I'm already pulling records. Corporate filings, property transfers, anything public that connects to Mom's work or the HOA. I'll have a preliminary report by Thursday. She said she was catching the first flight on Friday. I told her not to worry. She said, I'm not worried, Dad. I'm already pulling records. That was when I understood my daughter was not coming to comfort me. She was coming to build a case. Tuesday morning, I walked into Bay 3 and asked Holden to pull the restaurant parking lot footage from Saturday night. Ilara was building a case 400 miles away in Charlotte. I was building one in my garage in Marietta. The difference was she had formal training in compliance documentation. I had 31 years of learning that evidence doesn't care about feelings. Holden looked up from the white Chevy Silverado on the rat grease on his hands. A question in his eyes he didn't ask. He just nodded and wiped his palms on a shop rag. Routine check after the event, I said. He connected his laptop to the camera system without comment. The truck's dashcam had been parked facing the restaurant entrance Saturday night, running in parking mode, recording motion-triggered clips. Standard stuff. I installed dashcams in every vehicle I inspected that would take one. People think cameras are about catching accidents. They're about catching truth. Holden pulled up the motion detection filter, scrolling through Saturday evening's clips. Timestamps appeared in white text in the bottom corner. 8:47 p.m. 9:23 p.m. 10:06 p.m. What time range? Holden asked. 10 to 11. He filtered the view. The parking lot appeared in grainy night vision, the restaurant entrance lit by overhead lights. Cars coming and going, people walking to their vehicles. Then at 10:14 p.m. a figure appeared in frame, Angela Foster walking toward her car alone. Her movements were quick, purposeful, the way people walk when they want to leave somewhere. 10 seconds later, another figure entered frame, Brent Ramsey following the same path. He caught up to her near a dark sedan. His hand reached out, touched her shoulder. She turned, stepped back. He stepped closer. No Lester in the frame. I was still inside the restaurant at 10:14 p.m. I knew this because I'd checked my watch when Gail excused herself to the restroom around 10:10. I'd been sitting at that table until 10:20 when I'd gotten up to look for her. The timestamp said 10:14 p.m. I had been inside at 10:14 p.m. The footage proved it. Sir Holden said, his voice careful. There's something else on the same drive, from earlier that day. Show me. Timestamps don't lie. They can't be negotiated with or convinced. They simply are. 10:14 p.m. meant 10:14 p.m., and I had not been in that parking lot, which meant the narrative Roxanne had built in that restaurant, that I was the aggressor, that I'd made the scene, that I'd upset Angela, was constructed on a foundation that video evidence could demolish in 14 seconds. Holden rewound the footage 5:42 p.m. Saturday afternoon, 4 hours before the party was scheduled to start. Two vehicles in the restaurant parking lot. The place was empty. No event, no setup crew, just two cars parked side by side in the back corner of the lot, away from the entrance. Gail's silver Honda Accord, Brent's silver Lexus. Both cars were running. I could see the exhaust in the cooling evening air. Both drivers' side windows were rolled down. Gail and Brent sat in their respective vehicles, driver's window to driver's window, close enough to pass something between them. They sat there for 7 minutes. Holden didn't say anything, he just let the footage play in silence. I watched the timestamp tick forward. 5:43, 5:44, 5:45. At 5:49 p.m., Brent's window rolled up. Both cars reversed out of their spaces and drove away in opposite directions. Can you zoom on the Honda? I asked. Holden adjusted the frame, enlarging the image of Gail's car. The resolution wasn't perfect, dashcam footage never is, but it was good enough to see through her windshield. Good enough to see the phone mounted on her dashboard. Good enough to see the notification light up her screen at 5:47 p.m. Good enough to see the sender name. Old Bear, 27 years. That's how long that nickname had existed between us. She had given it away like handing someone else the key to a house I thought only we lived in. I had called myself Old Bear because she laughed every time I did. It started the first year we were married when she was 33 and I was 40. I joked that she'd married an old bear who worked with his hands and came home smelling like motor oil. She'd thought it was charming. She used to leave notes signed with a little bear emoji before emojis were common, just a hand-drawn face with round ears. I stopped using the name somewhere around year 15. The jokes stopped landing. The laughter faded. Life became routine and cute nicknames became things we'd outgrown. But the name still existed. It was still ours. Private language built over decades of marriage. The kind of intimacy that can't be manufactured, only accumulated. And she'd given it to him. Not just shared it. Given it. Brent was sending her messages using the name I'd created, the identity I'd built as a younger man, trying to make my new wife smile. He was using our private language like he'd been part of the conversation from the beginning. Sir? Holden's voice was quiet. You want me to save these files? Yes, both clips, timestamp them, export to external drive. He worked in silence, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The Silverado on the rack above us dripped coolant into the catchpan with a steady rhythm. Outside, a customer pulled into the lot, tires crunching on gravel. Normal sounds, normal day, except nothing was normal anymore. Gail had been in that parking lot 4 hours before the party. She'd told me she was working late at the clinic Saturday, that she'd come straight to the restaurant from her shift. The clinic closed at 3 on Saturdays. She'd had nearly 3 hours unaccounted for, and she'd spent at least 7 minutes of them sitting in a parking lot with Brent Ramsey, exchanging something I couldn't see, receiving messages from a name that used to be mine. Holden handed me the external drive. Routine check complete, he said, and I heard what he wasn't saying. I won't ask and you don't have to explain. I had called myself Old Bear because she laughed every time I did. 27 years ago, I stopped laughing somewhere around year 15. I just never knew she had found someone else to use the name with. Gail sat down on the gray sofa Tuesday night at 7 o'clock and folded her hands like someone about to deliver a presentation. I was still thinking about the nickname, Old Bear, the intimacy she'd handed to someone else, like passing along a recipe or a book recommendation. But I set that aside when she cleared her throat and started speaking in a voice that didn't sound like hers. I need to talk to you about Saturday night, she said. About the incident and what it means going forward. Incident, not party, not misunderstanding. Incident. I'm listening, I said. This pattern of intimidation creates an unsafe environment. I need you to understand the severity. Pattern, intimidation, unsafe environment, severity. I'd been married to this woman for 32 years. I knew how she spoke. She used contractions. She started sentences with well or look when she was working up to something difficult. She hesitated. She circled. She was human. This wasn't human. This was formatted. What pattern? I asked. Aggressive confrontation in public settings. Refusal to acknowledge how your behavior affects others. Escalation when challenged. Each statement landed with the same weight, same rhythm, no emotion, no natural flow. She was speaking from memory, delivering exact sentences someone had given her. Gail, I stopped a man from. That's exactly what I'm talking about. She leaned forward, her hands still folded, her posture straight. Reframing your actions as protective when witnesses saw something different. That's deflection. That's part of the pattern. Deflection, pattern, witnesses. I recognize the structure now. I'd seen it before years ago when a customer tried to file a fraudulent insurance claim after I'd failed his vehicle inspection. His lawyer had sent a letter using this exact format: describe the behavior, state the consequences, demand the action. Professional language designed to create a paper trail. This was legal script, restraining order application wording. Who told you to say this? I asked quietly. Her jaw tightened. Just a fraction. Just enough. No one told me anything. I'm telling you how I feel. You don't feel in bullet points. I feel unsafe, she said, and there was the first crack in the script, a flash of something real beneath the rehearsed lines. I feel like I can't trust you to control yourself. Brent knows how to handle situations like this. He's dealt with. She stopped, caught herself, but the damage was done. Brent knows how to handle situations like this. Not people like you. Not conflicts like this. Situations. Plural. Like this, meaning he'd handled them before. Meaning this wasn't the first time he'd been part of whatever this was. She had rehearsed this. Someone had given her lines. Someone had told her where to pause, when to emphasize, how to wait for the reaction that would prove I was exactly what the script said I was. She finished speaking and folded her hands and waited. She was waiting for me to react, to raise my voice, to give her what she needed. I stood up and poured another cup of coffee. I'm not doing this tonight, I said. I'm tired. I watched the confusion cross her face. This wasn't in the script. I was supposed to argue, supposed to escalate, supposed to prove the pattern of intimidation she'd just described. I walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door. Friday morning, I picked up Alara at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in early fog. She came through the arrival gate with a carry-on bag and a laptop case, moving with purpose. She hugged me briefly and didn't ask how I was doing. Let's go home, she said. We need to talk at the table. 20 minutes later, we sat in the kitchen while Gail was at work. Alara opened her laptop and turned it toward me. I requested email logs and calendar data from the dental clinic domain where Mom works. Compliance access. I pulled everything from last weekend. The screen showed a spreadsheet with timestamps, sender addresses, recipient addresses, subject lines. Rows and rows of data, most of it routine appointment confirmations and insurance correspondence. Alara's finger traced down to a highlighted line. Saturday night, 10:47 p.m. Email sent from Mom's work address to Roxanne Fleming at the HOA. Subject incident report, November flower party. I looked at the timestamp, 10:47 p.m. The incident occurred at 10:52 p.m., I said slowly. According to the dashcam footage, I stood up at 10:52. I know, Alara said. I checked the footage you sent me, cross-referenced it with the email metadata. The incident report was created 5 minutes before the incident it describes. My daughter closed the laptop slowly. We sat across the kitchen table where her mother had made pancakes every Sunday for 20 years. The table hadn't changed. Everything else had. Someone had written a report about my behavior, my aggressive confrontation, my intimidating presence, my pattern of escalation 5 minutes before I did anything, 5 minutes before I stood up, 5 minutes before I spoke. They knew what I would do before I did it. Or they didn't know. They didn't care. Because the report was already written, already formatted, already waiting to be sent the moment I gave them anything that looked close enough to justify it. Brent touching Angela's shoulder wasn't harassment they needed to stop. It was bait they needed me to take. The email was drafted earlier, Alara said, her voice quiet and precise. Probably days earlier. It sat in Mom's drafts folder. At 10:47 p.m. someone clicked send. You didn't stand up until 10:52. But by 10:47, the report was already in Roxanne's inbox, already documenting an incident that hadn't happened yet. They were waiting for me, I said. They were waiting for you to do exactly what you did. Protect someone. Intervene. Be the person you've always been. And the moment you did it, they had the documentation ready to prove you were something else. She looked at me across the kitchen table, the same table where her mother had made pancakes every Sunday for 20 years. Dad, she said quietly, this wasn't a reaction to what you did. This was already waiting for you. Harold Sinclair opened the family meeting Saturday afternoon by saying we needed to put this behind us as a family. The trap had been waiting for me at the party. That's what Alara had proven with the email metadata. Now I sat in another room wondering what trap was waiting here. Harold, 68, Gail's father with formal bearing and measured voice, presided from the head chair in his living room, filled with photographs of better times. Dolores Sinclair, 66, Gail's mother, who had taught Sunday school for 30 years, sat beside him. She spoke about women's safety with the certainty of someone who had already decided which woman needed protecting. Gail sat on the black leather sofa across from me. Elara sat pointedly beside me, her laptop bag at her feet, her posture straight. My daughter had positioned herself. The incident at the party has caused concern, Harold said. We want to address it as a family before it becomes something larger. Women's safety is not a small thing, Dolores added. When someone feels threatened, we have to take that seriously. I noticed she didn't say Gail's name, just someone. I intervened to stop harassment, I said. The footage shows that. The footage shows escalation, Gail said quietly. She wasn't using the rehearsed legal script from Tuesday night. She sounded like herself again, which somehow made it worse. You raised your voice. You made a scene. People were uncomfortable. One person was uncomfortable, Elara said, her voice calm and precise. The woman being touched without consent. Everyone else was uncomfortable because they had to acknowledge it was happening. Dolores's mouth tightened. Elara, we're trying to find a path forward here. So am I, my daughter said. I'm just trying to find one based on what actually happened instead of what people want to remember. The room went quiet. Harold cleared his throat. This isn't about assigning blame, he said. This is about family, about finding a resolution that works for everyone. This wasn't a family meeting. This was a disruption management session. The goal wasn't truth. The goal was containment. I had seen it at the garage. Customers who didn't want to know what was broken just wanted it to stop making noise. After 15 minutes of careful language and indirect accusations, Harold stood and gestured toward the back door. Les, can we talk outside for a minute? I followed him onto the deck. November air cold and clean. The yard stretched out behind the house, well maintained and empty. Harold put his hands in his pockets. There's a 30-day agreement on the table. You stay at the garage apartment. Give her space. This goes away. This, I said, the tension, the conflict. Gail needs time to feel safe in her own home again. And after 30 days, you come back. You work on the marriage. But right now, separation creates breathing room. I looked at the man who'd been my father-in-law for 32 years, who'd taught me to smoke a brisket, who'd helped me install the commercial-grade lift in Bay 2 when I couldn't afford to hire it done. And the property paperwork, I asked. Harold paused. 1 second, maybe less, but it was there. What property paperwork? The agreement, the 30-day separation. Does it cover property assets, leases? It's a temporary arrangement for living situation. But he'd paused. And in that pause, I understood the 30-day agreement wasn't Harold's idea. Someone who knew about the garage, about my commercial property, about lease terms and transfer clauses, had briefed him, had given him the talking points, had told him what to say and how to say it. Harold was being used the same way Gail had been used Tuesday night. Given a script, told it was for the family, told it would help. I'll need to review any paperwork with my daughter, I said. Of course, of course. Harold pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. 3 pages stapled. Just look it over. It's standard stuff. Standard, that word again. We went back inside. I took the document. Gail watched me from the sofa. Elara watched Gail. The room felt like a courtroom where everyone had already decided the verdict. We left 10 minutes later. Saturday evening, Elara spread the agreement on the kitchen table under the overhead lights. She read every line. I watched her eyes move across the pages, watched her finger trace certain passages, watched her go back and reread section 4 twice. Page 2, she said finally. Clause 4B, Party A agrees to temporarily vacate primary residence and all associated commercial properties. The garage, I said. Commercial properties, plural. The garage is a commercial property. You own the building and lease the land, right? 19 years. Clause 4B has no expiration date. Temporary is not defined. No timeline. No conditions for return. Just temporary. She set the page down and looked at me. If you sign this and leave the garage for 30 days, depending on the terms of your commercial lease, you may be voluntarily abandoning the property. Some leases have abandonment clauses. 30 consecutive days of vacancy can trigger a transfer or termination. You think someone knows my lease terms? I think someone wrote an agreement that uses the word temporary while making sure legally it isn't. Who writes a temporary agreement with no expiration date? Someone who needs you to think it's temporary while making sure legally it isn't. I pulled out my phone and opened the saved dashcam files. The 5:42 p.m. footage of Gail and Brent in the parking lot, the old bear notification, the pre-written incident report. Someone's building something, I said. The party was step one. The incident report was ready before I stood up. The apology list was formatted like legal documentation. Gail's Tuesday speech was restraining order language, and now a 30-day agreement that could cost me the garage. Alara closed the document. Don't sign anything, Dad. Not one word, not your initials, nothing. I looked at my daughter. She looked at me. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. I nodded. I was already thinking about who had written this. Who knew enough about commercial leases to hide a property trap? In Clause 4B, who had access to legal templates and HR documentation formats? Who could coordinate Gail Roxanne Harold in a pre-written incident report? Someone was building a case, but I was starting to build one too. Monday morning, I walked into Conrad Mercer's law office on the fourth floor of a building in downtown Marietta with my daughter carrying a folder full of evidence. I'd spent Sunday night thinking about who could write an agreement that hid a property trap in Clause 4B. Someone with legal training, someone who understood commercial leases, someone who knew exactly what I owned and how to take it. Conrad Mercer, 54 family and commercial property attorney, whose dark wood office overlooked downtown Marietta, had the kind of sharp eyes that saw through badly written agreements before the ink was dry. He'd handled my garage lease renewal 3 years ago. He knew what I owned. More importantly, he knew what it was worth. Elara spread the evidence across his conference table. The 30-day agreement. The email metadata showing the incident report written 5 minutes before the incident. The dashcam footage files. The parking lot timestamps. Conrad read in silence for 20 minutes. Then he looked up. Sir, this is no longer a family dispute. What you have here is attempted fraudulent transfer of commercial assets. The 30-day agreement is a constructive abandonment trap. Explain that, I said. Clause 4B requires you to vacate all commercial properties with no expiration date and no definition of temporary. If you sign and leave the garage for 30 days, depending on your lease terms, which I'd need to review, you could be deemed to have voluntarily abandoned the commercial property. That triggers transfer provisions, potentially forfeiture of lease rights. Elara leaned forward. Someone knows the lease terms. Someone knows exactly what they're doing, Conrad said. He turned to his computer and pulled up the Georgia Secretary of State Business Registry. Let me check something. What's the other man's full name? Brent Ramsey, I said. Conrad typed, clicked, scrolled, then stopped. He has an active LLC filed in Georgia 3 months ago, August of this year. August. 4 months before the party. 4 months before I stood up at that restaurant. She had been planning this since summer. What's the LLC called? Elara asked. Conrad read from the screen. Marietta Property Solutions, LLC. Registered agent is Roxanne Fleming. He paused. And there is a silent partner listed with 40% interest. I already knew. Before he said it, I knew. The silent partner is your wife, Gail Hewitt. She signed that document in August, 4 months before the party. She had already chosen a side before you even knew there was a fight. The office went quiet, except for the sound of traffic 4 floors below. Elara's hand found mine across the table. Not comfort, solidarity. What kind of business does the LLC conduct? I asked. Property acquisition and management, commercial real estate. Conrad looked at me over his reading glasses. They're positioning to acquire your garage. Can they do that? Not legally, but if you sign this agreement and vacate, they create a gray area. Then they file a claim of abandonment. Force a legal dispute. Tie up the property in court for months while they argue you gave up your rights. Even if you win, eventually the legal fees and business interruption could cost you everything. Elara pulled out her phone and took pictures of Conrad's computer screen showing the LLC filing. We need more, she said. We need to know how long this has been going on. We need pattern, timeline, proof of coordination. Conrad nodded. I'll file a motion to access the full LLC documentation, articles of organization operating agreement member records. But that takes time. What do you have access to now? Camera footage, I said. 6 weeks of it, maybe more. Pull everything, Conrad said. Every appearance of Ramsey's vehicle, every timestamp. Build the timeline. Tuesday afternoon, Elara and I stood in Bay 3 with Holden at his laptop. 3 monitors showed filtered garage footage motion detection, active time parameters set for the past 6 weeks. 11 times in 6 weeks, Holden said, his voice quiet and professional. All during your outside work hours, not once when you were home. The pattern was surgical. Every visit timed for when I was doing mobile inspections emissions testing at the state facility parts runs to the supplier across town. Someone had tracked my schedule. Someone had known exactly when the garage would be empty, except for whoever was waiting inside. Holden scrolled backward through the timeline. October 28th, October 21st, October 14th. He stopped at October 14th. Sir, he said, this one's different. He turned the screen toward Elara. I stood behind her shoulder and watched the footage play. 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon 4 weeks ago. Gail's Honda Accord pulled into the lot. She got out, walked to the side door, unlocked it with the spare key I'd given her years ago for emergencies. 3 minutes later, Brent Ramsey's Lexus pulled in. He parked beside her car. She met him at the door. She led him inside, into my garage, into the space where I'd worked for 19 years. The timestamp said October 14th. 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks of knowing and not knowing of working in that space without realizing what had happened there. Elara stood up. She walked out of Bay 3 without a word. I followed her to the back lot, where the fence separated the commercial property from the residential neighborhood behind it. I stood next to my daughter in the back lot. I didn't put my arm around her immediately. I let her have the moment, because some things need to be felt before they can be fought. Her hand was over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. This was the first time in the story that someone cried. Not me, not yet. I'd been too busy documenting, cataloging, building the case. But Elara, my daughter, who'd flown in from Charlotte with her laptop and her compliance training and her methodical analysis, she'd reached the point where the evidence stopped being data and became her mother's choices. I gave her 2 minutes. Then I put my hand on her shoulder. When she finally turned, her eyes were dry. Okay, she said, her voice steady and clear. What do we do next? Wednesday afternoon, I walked into Keith's small notary office to pick up copies of the garage lease and commercial land deed. What we did next was verify ownership. Elara had been right Tuesday when she'd asked what came next through dry eyes in the back lot. Evidence only mattered if we could prove what was mine to begin with. If they were building a case to take the garage, we needed to prove I owned it free and clear. Keith Hewitt, 62, notary, and my younger brother had been the family document keeper since our father passed 11 years ago. His small office had gray filing cabinets lining the walls and a yellow desk lamp that had belonged to Dad. He pulled the files without asking questions. Garage lease, he said, sliding the first document across his desk. Signed and renewed 3 years ago. Your name is the sole lessee. Commercial land deed, you purchased the lot outright in 2015. Your name is the sole owner. No co-ownership clause, no encumbrances. I looked at the documents. Clean titles, sole ownership. Everything Conrad needed to prove the 30-day agreement was a trap designed to steal what legally belonged to me. Thank you, I said, standing. Wait! Keith's hand went to another drawer. There's one more thing. He pulled out a manila folder with our father's handwriting on the tab. Estate Lester. Dad left a trust. You've never opened it. I think it's time. I sat back down. What trust? He set it up in 2004, year before he got sick. Put assets aside in your name. You were supposed to open it after he died, but you never did. I figured you didn't need it. The garage was doing well. You had your own income. Why are you telling me now? Keith's jaw tightened. Your wife's attorney sent a letter last month, asking about estate assets, probate records, anything in your father's name that might have passed to you. The room felt smaller suddenly. They know the trust exists, I said. They're trying to find out what's in it, what it's worth. I told them I had no information to provide. Only you can open it. Only you can access the documentation. My father had been a quiet man. He didn't say much, but he had sat down somewhere in 2004 and written words that protected me in 2025. I sat in that small office and missed him, in a way I hadn't let myself miss him in 11 years. They knew about it before I did, I said quietly. Yes, Keith said. Someone's been digging, deep. I took the folder. My father had been dead for 11 years. He had built something and put it aside for me and never said a word about it. I hadn't opened it because I thought I didn't need it. It turned out the people trying to take everything from me knew about it before I did. Thursday evening, I walked into the HOA community hall with Ilara beside me. 60 chairs filled the meeting room. Most of them were occupied. This was the official November board meeting open to all residents. Roxanne Fleming sat at the head table with two other board members. Gail sat in the front row, 3 seats from the center aisle. Roxanne called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. Before we move to regular business, she said, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority, I want to address an incident that occurred at our flower party earlier this month. She pulled out a printed document, the incident report. On the evening of November 7th, a disturbance occurred involving Lester Hewitt, a resident and guest at the event. The report documents a pattern of intimidation and aggressive behavior that made several attendees feel unsafe. She read from the report my name, the accusations, the description of my standing up, raising my voice, creating a hostile environment. She made it sound like I'd been the problem, like Angela Foster hadn't been uncomfortable until I intervened. When she finished, she looked directly at me. Mr. Hewitt, you're welcome to respond if you'd like to address the community. I stood, slowly, calmly. Ilara's phone was already recording in her lap, angled to catch the front table. I have 3 questions for the record, please, sir. I said. My voice was level, professional, the same tone I used when explaining to a customer why their vehicle failed inspection. When was this report filed? Roxanne blinked. Saturday evening, the night of the party. What time Saturday evening specifically? She glanced at the document. I don't have the exact time here. I do, I said, because I have a timestamp showing this document was created at 10:47 p.m. That's 5 minutes before the incident it describes occurred. The incident happened at 10:52 p.m. according to restaurant camera footage. Would you like to explain how you documented an event 5 minutes before it happened? The meeting room fell completely silent. Roxanne opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. 3 questions. That was all it took. Not shouting, not accusations, just 3 questions that pointed to the one thing that couldn't be argued with the timestamp. The report was prepared in advance, I continued. It was sitting in a draft folder, waiting to be sent the moment I did anything that looked close enough to justify it. That's not documentation of an incident. That's fabrication of evidence. I looked around the room, 60 faces staring back. Some confused, some uncomfortable, a few nodding slowly. I intervened to stop harassment, I said. The camera footage proves that. The timestamps prove the report was written before I stood up. Those are facts. Not opinions, not interpretations. Facts. I sat back down. Roxanne opened her mouth again. Still nothing. The board member beside her cleared his throat. I think we should table this discussion pending review of the timeline documentation Mr. Hewitt mentioned. Roxanne nodded mechanically. Tabled. Moving on to budget review. Ilara stopped recording. She didn't look at me, didn't smile, just saved the file and put her phone away. I had asked my 3 questions. The records had them now. 60 witnesses had heard the timestamp evidence. That was enough for tonight. Brent Ramsey walked straight across the parking lot toward me after everyone else had left the HOA meeting. 60 witnesses had heard the timestamp evidence inside the hall. That had been enough for the public record. But Brent walking toward me in the dark parking lot at 9:30 on a Thursday night, that was something different. Yellow streetlights cast long shadows across the asphalt. Cold November wind cut through my jacket. Ilara stood beside my truck phone, still in her hand from recording the meeting. She saw him coming and didn't move. Brent stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could see his face clearly, far enough that it didn't look like a physical confrontation. He'd calculated the distance. You're making this harder than it needs to be, old man, he said. His voice was low and cold, nothing like the friendly salesman tone from the restaurant party. The offer on the table is fair. Take it. The offer on the table. I hadn't received an official offer, just the 30-day agreement from Harold with the property trap hidden in Clause 4B. But Brent was talking about an offer like it already existed, like he knew I would reject the first agreement, like the next step was already prepared and waiting. He'd planned for my refusal. This wasn't improvisation. This was a script. I appreciate the concern, I said. Calm, level. The same tone I'd used inside at the meeting. Brent's jaw tightened. He'd expected argument, anger, something he could use. I didn't give it to him. He stood there for 5 more seconds. Then he turned and walked to his silver Lexus. The engine started. The headlights swept across the parking lot. I stood next to my truck until his taillights disappeared around the corner onto the main road. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Alara, recording. Her response came immediately, every word. A threat is only useful if someone hears it. Brent had just handed me his threat in front of my daughter with her phone recording. That wasn't a warning, that was evidence. Friday morning, I sat across from Conrad Mercer in his dark wood office for the second time that week. Conrad had spent Thursday night reviewing documents. Now he spread printouts across the conference table like he was building a case for trial. I pulled billing records from the dental clinic where your wife works, he said. The incident report that was faxed to the HOA office, the one created at 10:47 p.m., was sent from the clinic's system account. Gail sent it, I said. No, Conrad tapped one of the printouts. Wendy Ashford sent it, billing specialist at the clinic. She used the clinic's networked fax system to create and transmit official-looking documentation to the HOA. She's not an HOA employee. She doesn't have that authority, but she used her access at the dental clinic to produce what looks like legitimate incident paperwork. Wendy Ashford, 42 billing specialist at the dental clinic where Gail worked, had used the clinic's system account to create and fax official-looking incident reports she had no authority to produce. Why would a billing specialist at a dental clinic be involved in an HOA dispute? Alara asked. Conrad pulled up another document on his laptop and turned the screen toward us. Because she's part of the network. Look at this. Wendy Ashford had a civil matter filed in 2023. Small claims dispute over a property fence. Her attorney on record was Dean Warren out of Atlanta. He clicked to another screen. Roxanne Fleming had a civil matter the same year. HOA enforcement issue with a neighbor. Her attorney on record, Dean Warren. Another click. Brent Ramsey's LLC, Marietta Property Solutions, was incorporated 3 months ago in August. The filing attorney, Dean Warren. The office went quiet. One attorney. Not coincidence. Not parallel thinking. One person coordinating 3 people to execute one plan against one target. They've all worked with the same lawyer, I said slowly. For years. Since at least 2023, Conrad confirmed. Warren handled their previous legal matters. Small stuff. Property disputes. Then this year, he incorporates Brent's LLC with your wife as silent partner. He's the architect. He's been positioning them for this. Alara leaned forward. Can we prove Warren knew about the coordination that he was actively planning the fraudulent transfer? Not yet, Conrad said. Attorney-client privilege protects most of that. But we can prove the network exists. We can prove 3 people who all claim this is coincidence or misunderstanding have been using the same legal counsel for coordinated activities. That establishes pattern. That establishes conspiracy. I looked at the printouts spread across the table. Wendy Ashford using clinic resources to create false documentation. Roxanne Fleming reading that documentation at an official HOA meeting. Brent Ramsey operating an LLC designed to acquire my property. All 3 connected through one attorney who'd been building the structure for at least 2 years. And at the center of all of it, Gail, my wife, the silent partner with 40% interest, the person who'd given my nickname to another man, the person who'd signed LLC documents 4 months before I knew there was a fight. What about the parking lot threat last night? I asked. Recorded evidence of coercion, Conrad said. Brent explicitly referenced an offer and told you to take it. That's intimidation. That's actionable. He mentioned an offer I haven't received, which means it's coming. He jumped ahead in the script. Told you to accept something that hasn't been formally presented yet. That's how I know there's a next step already prepared. Conrad closed his laptop. They're not improvising, Mr. Hewitt. They've been building this for years. The 2023 civil matters. The LLC incorporation in August. The incident report pre-written in November. The 30-day agreement with the property trap. And now an offer that hasn't been delivered yet, but Brent already knows about. This is orchestrated. 3 people, 1 attorney, 1 plan, and my wife at the center of all of it. I thought about the kitchen, the Sunday pancakes, the 27 years. Then I stopped thinking about it. There was work to do. Thanksgiving Day. I sat in the small apartment behind the garage with my daughter and 2 boxes of restaurant food that neither of us had cooked. The work I'd had to do after discovering the conspiracy network included moving out of my own house. Conrad had advised it, not because I was afraid, because if I stayed and Gail claimed I made her feel unsafe, she could use that to accelerate the legal timeline. So I'd packed a bag and moved into the small apartment I kept behind the garage for nights when I worked late on difficult repairs. Elara had driven from Charlotte with Thanksgiving dinner from a restaurant off the interstate. Turkey and dressing in cardboard containers, cranberry sauce in a plastic cup. It wasn't the meal Gail used to make, but it was the first meal in weeks where I didn't feel alone. We were halfway through the turkey when someone knocked on the apartment door. Holden Cruz stood on the small concrete step with an envelope in his hand. "Sir," he said, "my dad asked me to give you this if anything ever happened." He handed me the envelope, plain white, no writing on the outside. The flap wasn't sealed, just tucked. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of notebook paper with handwriting I recognized. Holden's father, my friend, the man who'd worked with me for 5 years before a business deal went bad and destroyed his company. The note was short. Brent Ramsey, 2247 Oak Valley Road, Marietta. Lot 14B deal 2017. Walked away with everything. I read it twice. Then I looked at Holden. "Sit down," I said. "Tell me everything your father told you about Brent." Holden came inside. Elara cleared a space at the small table. We sat under the lamplight with cold coffee and the remains of Thanksgiving dinner, and Holden told us what his father had made him promise to remember. Dad trusted Brent in a land deal in 2017. Commercial lot out near the highway. They signed an LLC together. Dad contributed capital $380,000. Brent was supposed to handle the development permits and construction. $380,000. The same amount Conrad had estimated my garage and land were worth. "What happened?" Elara asked. We sat like that for a few minutes. My daughter closed the apartment quiet around us. This was what Brent and Gail had been willing to destroy. This ordinary, irreplaceable, completely priceless Thanksgiving evening with my daughter in my small apartment. 90 days after signing, Holden continued, Brent used a clause buried in the LLC operating agreement to oust Dad from signing authority. The clause said if any member failed to attend 3 consecutive monthly meetings, they forfeited voting rights and asset control. But Brent never scheduled the meetings, never sent notices, then claimed Dad had missed them and used that to take full control of the LLC and the property. Dad lost everything he'd put in. No legal recourse because he'd signed the agreement willingly. Elara was already on her laptop. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. "What was the LLC called?" she asked. "Oak Valley Properties," Holden said. "Filed in Georgia in March 2017. Elara pulled up the Secretary of State Business Registry. Typed, clicked, then went still. "I have it," she said quietly. Oak Valley Properties, LLC, Incorporated, March 2017. Dissolved June 2018 after asset transfer. She opened another window and pulled up the current LLC Marietta Property Solutions, the one targeting my garage. For a long minute, she just stared at both screens. Then she started taking notes. "Same term structure," she said. "Same 90-day meeting clause. Same language about forfeiture of signing rights. The consultant listed on both LLCs." She stopped. "Clifford Blanchard. He's on both." Clifford Blanchard. The name was in Brent's current LLC paperwork. The same name from 8 years ago. "He's running the same script," I said. "Same script. Not improvisation. Not adapting to circumstances. A tested scenario run twice 8 years apart because the first time it worked perfectly." "My dad told me something else," Holden said. His voice was quiet but steady. He said if I ever got into trouble with someone like Brent, the weak point was always the registered agent, the person whose name is on the official documents. They're the one the state holds accountable. They're the one who takes the legal exposure if anything goes wrong. Elara's fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. "The registered agent for Oak Valley Properties in 2017, she said slowly, reading from the screen. "Roxanne Fleming." She clicked to the other window. "The current LLC. "The registered agent for Marietta Property Solutions," she said. "Roxanne Fleming." The apartment went completely quiet. Not one LLC. 2 LLCs. 8 years apart. Same structure, same consultant, same hidden clauses, same method of stealing assets from people who trusted the wrong man. And the same registered agent both times. Roxanne Fleming had been Brent's registered agent when he stole from Holden's father in 2017. She'd watched him execute the script, watched him destroy a family's finances, watched him walk away with $380,000. And then she'd agreed to be his registered agent again in 2025 when he decided to run the same script on me. She wasn't just involved in the current conspiracy, she was the institutional knowledge, the person who knew how Brent operated because she'd been part of it before, the person who could connect the past to the present in a way that proved this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, a business model, a tested, repeatable method of theft. The boy looked at me and said, "My dad said if you ever got into trouble with Brent, the weak point was always the registered agent." My daughter looked up from her laptop. "Roxanne Fleming," she said quietly. "It's always Roxanne Fleming." Monday morning, Elara called the restaurant manager and asked to review the camera footage from the November party. Roxanne Fleming was the weak point. That's what Holden's father had written 8 years ago. That's what the pattern proved. But weak points only mattered if you knew how to apply pressure. We needed more than patterns. We needed proof that couldn't be argued with. Dean Warren, 48 restaurant manager whose small office behind the kitchen smelled faintly of the lunch service still being cleaned up, had managed this location for 12 years and knew his camera system inside and out. He nodded when Elara explained what we were looking for and pulled up the security footage from the night of the party without asking questions. The monitor showed the hallway, the dining room entrance, the corner where Serena Cooper had stood during the incident. Dean scrolled through the timeline timestamp running in the bottom corner. "Here," he said, stopping the playback. "There's a gap. 22:49 to 22:52 p.m. Exactly 3 minutes. Hallway corner camera." The footage jumped. One moment the hallway was there, people visible in the background. The next moment 3 minutes had passed, and the angle had shifted slightly, like someone had adjusted the camera after reactivating it. "Equipment malfunction?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No," Dean said. "Our system logs every access. If someone cut that feed, there would be a record of the login. The time, the credential used, everything." Elara leaned forward. "Can we see the audit log?" Dean looked at her. Then he looked at me. Not at Elara. At me. Like he was making a decision about something that mattered more than security footage. He nodded slowly. "I'll print it myself," he said. He pulled up another screen, typed a password, clicked through 2 security prompts. Then the printer in the corner hummed to life. Dean pulled the single sheet and handed it to me. Not to Elara, to me, directly. "Oh, I want you to know I had nothing to do with this," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. "Whoever did used a credential that shouldn't have had access to this system. 3 minutes, that's all it took to erase the proof. 3 minutes at 22:49 p.m. while I was still inside that restaurant, not knowing I was being set up." I looked at the audit log. Rows of timestamps and user IDs. Most of them were Dean's credentials or the owner's. Routine checks, system maintenance, normal restaurant security monitoring. Then at 22:49 p.m. a different credential appeared. I handed the log to Elara. She read it. Then she took a picture of it with her phone before handing it back. "Thank you," I said to Dean. He nodded. "I've been doing this job 12 years. I know what it looks like when someone tries to hide something. Whatever happened at that party, the truth should be on that footage. Someone made sure it wasn't." Monday afternoon, we sat in Conrad Mercer's office for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. Conrad read the audit log in silence. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the security contractor records from the party. "Log in at 22:49 Saturday night," he said. "Security contractor credential. Name on contract, Serena Cooper. She was at the party." Serena Cooper. The woman who'd been standing near the camera corner. The woman who'd positioned herself exactly where the best angle would capture our table. The woman I'd noticed watching instead of working. "What time did the incident occur?" Conrad asked. I'd reviewed my own dashcam footage enough times to know the answer by heart. I stood up at 22:52 p.m. Conrad looked at the audit log again. "She logged in at 22:49, 3 minutes before you stood up. The footage was deleted at 22:51 p.m., 1 minute before the incident. Then she logged out at 22:52. "What footage did she delete?" Elara asked. "Whatever happened between 22:49 and 22:52, Conrad said. 3 minutes of activity in that hallway, based on your dashcam showing Angela Foster leaving the dining room at 22:14 and Brent following her. I'd say those 3 minutes show Brent continuing to harass her after you'd already confronted him inside. The footage that would prove you were completely right to intervene. Evidence tampering, 2 words that changed everything. My daughter wrote them down in her notebook. I watched her underline them twice. The attorney was already dialing. This crosses a line, Conrad said, setting his phone down. Serena Cooper used security contractor access to delete evidence. She logged in before the incident occurred, deleted footage 1 minute before you stood up, and logged out the moment the confrontation happened. That's not accidental. That's not a system error. That's deliberate destruction of evidence to support a false narrative. He looked at both of us. This is evidence tampering, he said. This is a criminal matter now. The words hung in the air. Criminal matter, not family dispute, not property disagreement, not marital conflict. Criminal? What does that mean legally? I asked. Conrad pulled out a legal pad and started writing. It means I'm no longer just your property attorney. It means we file a criminal complaint with the DA's office. Evidence tampering. Conspiracy to defraud. Potentially more depending on what else we find. It means Serena Cooper faces felony charges. It means everyone who coordinated with her, Brent, Roxanne, Wendy, they all face exposure to criminal liability. Ilara was already on her laptop. Serena Cooper, security contractor. How did she get restaurant system access? That's the question, Conrad said. Dean Warren said she used a credential that shouldn't have had access. Someone gave her that login. Someone with authority over the restaurant security system. I thought about the party, the setup, the timing, the pre-written incident report, the coordinated response from Roxanne, the parking lot threat from Brent. All of it orchestrated, all of it planned. And now we had proof someone had committed a crime to make sure the plan worked. Tuesday evening, I came home to find Gail waiting in the hallway with a leather suitcase already packed beside her. Conrad had been dialing the DA's office when I left his office that afternoon. Evidence tampering meant criminal charges. It meant Serena Cooper facing felony prosecution. It meant the conspiracy was no longer just a family problem I could solve quietly. But Gail was standing in our hallway like none of that mattered. The suitcase sat beside her feet. Brown leather. The one we'd bought for a trip to the coast 15 years ago. It looked full. I think we need to make this official, she said. Her voice was calm, practiced. The 30-day agreement. I've already arranged temporary housing for you at the garage apartment. Signing now would simplify everything. I looked at the suitcase. What's in there? Your things, work clothes, basics. I thought it would be easier if I helped you pack. She gestured to it like she was offering me a gift, like she'd done me a favor. I opened the suitcase. Work boots. 3 inspection uniforms clean and pressed. Socks, undershirts, a jacket. Everything folded with the kind of care that takes time. Everything organized, like someone who knew exactly what I'd need. And at the bottom, wrapped in a towel, my father's old toolbox. The toolbox had been in the attic for 6 years. Since he died. I'd put it up there because I couldn't look at it every day, but couldn't throw it away either. It was heavy. Cast iron. The kind of thing you don't pack by accident. The kind of thing you only pack if you've been planning this for a long time. When did you pack this? I asked. This afternoon, after you left. The toolbox is in the attic. You had to go up there. You had to know where it was. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. I thought you'd want it. I touched the suitcase handle. The leather was warm, not room temperature. Warm from being held, from being gripped. She'd been standing here waiting for me for at least 20 minutes. She'd known I was coming home. She'd timed this. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. Her face didn't change, but her hands did. They moved to her sides. Flat. Still. The way people stand when they're trying to control a reaction. This doesn't have to be difficult, she said. 30 days. That's all. Give us both space. Then we talk. We can talk now. I don't think we can. She picked up the suitcase and set it beside the door. The agreement is on the kitchen table. Take your time, but I need an answer by Friday. She walked upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. I stood in the hallway looking at the suitcase my wife had packed with my father's toolbox inside it. And I understood this wasn't spontaneous. This was choreographed. She'd been ready for this conversation before I walked through the door. Before I tell you what Harold accidentally revealed the next morning, are you still with me? Comment. A, if you think he slipped on purpose, or B, if it was a genuine mistake, and add one short reason why. Quick note, the next part includes some recreated dialogue for narrative purposes, but the core deception is real. Wednesday morning, Harold Sinclair came to the garage. I was in the office reviewing the LLC documents. Conrad had pulled the 2017 fraud against Holden's father, the current scheme targeting me, both with Roxanne Fleming as registered agent when Harold knocked on the doorframe. "Wanted to check on you," he said. "See how you're holding up?" He'd never come to the garage before. Not in 19 years. Not once. "I'm fine," I said. "Gail mentioned you two are working through some things. The separation agreement. We're discussing it." Harold sat in the chair across from my desk without being invited. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "She just needs space," he said. "Once you sign and move to the apartment for 30 days, she can settle down. Get her head clear. Then you two can work on the marriage properly. And if I don't sign—" He paused. Not long, maybe 2 seconds, but I caught it. "Then things get more complicated," he said. "Legally, emotionally, for everyone." "Complicated how?" "Gail only needs to maintain the 48-hour window before the transfer can be finalized. If you make this harder, she'll have no choice but to—" He stopped. His face changed, like he'd just heard what he'd said. "48-hour window?" I asked. "What window?" I— Harold stood up. "I misspoke. I meant the 30-day agreement. 30 days, not 48 hours. You said 48-hour window. Before what transfer?" "I don't know what I said. I'm tired. This whole situation has Dolores and me both exhausted." He was already moving toward the door. "Harold?" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "What did you mean by the transfer?" "I have to go," he said, and he left. I pulled out my phone and checked the voice memo app. I'd started recording when Harold sat down, old habit from documenting customer disputes. The last 30 seconds were clear. Harold used to teach me to check tire pressure on Sunday mornings when I was first married to Gail. He'd show me the gauge, explain how to read it, talk about the importance of precision. The same meticulous attention to detail now being used against me. Except this time he'd been too precise. He'd let slip exactly what I needed to know. I listened to the recording 3 times. I isolated the phrase 48-hour window. Then I opened my laptop and started searching Georgia LLC transfer laws. 20 minutes later, I found it. Emergency Asset Transfer, Provision Section 14-11-304. If certain fraud conditions are documented, an LLC can execute an emergency transfer of member interests within 48 hours of filing with the Secretary of State. 48 hours. My hands froze over the keyboard. They weren't just trying to steal the garage. They were planning to use a legal loophole designed to protect victims of fraud, to commit fraud. Conrad Mercer slid the LLC filing across his desk, and I saw Gail's name printed in the member registry. 40% ownership in a company designed to strip me of everything. They were planning to use a legal loophole meant to protect victims, to commit fraud. I'd spent Wednesday night cross-referencing Georgia LLC law until I understood the mechanism. Now, Thursday afternoon, I was in Conrad's office, learning exactly up how Gail had positioned herself to execute it. "Let me walk you through the complete structure," Conrad said. Elara sat beside me, laptop open, taking notes like she was documenting evidence for trial. Conrad pointed to the first section of the LLC operating agreement. Roxanne Fleming, registered agent, 5% equity interest. 5% for running the paperwork, for being the public face, for taking the legal exposure if anything went wrong. Second member, Conrad continued, Gail Hewitt, silent limited partner, 40% equity interest. 40%, not a small stake, not symbolic involvement. 40% ownership in a company whose primary listed asset was my garage. Elara leaned forward. "What's the filing date?" Conrad checked the header. April 23rd, 2025. April. 7 months before the November party. 7 months before I stood up to stop Brent from touching Angela Foster. 7 months before the incident report was written, 5 minutes before the incident occurred. April. Alara's voice was sharp. "Dad, that's when you renewed the garage lease." She knew the exact timing. I had renewed the commercial lease in April, signed a 3-year extension, told Gail about it over dinner because it meant the business was stable, the income was secure, our future was solid. She'd filed LLC paperwork claiming partial ownership of that same property 2 weeks later. "Your wife isn't just complicit," Conrad said quietly. "She's a founding member with economic rights. She has a financial stake in the outcome. She profits if this succeeds. 40%. I kept coming back to that number. She owned 40% of a fraud built on my name, built on my work, built on the garage I'd operated for 19 years, before she ever thought about joining an LLC designed to steal it. The primary asset is listed as 1847 Polk Street," Conrad said, reading from the document. "That's your garage address. They filed it 7 months ago," I said. "The party was the trigger. The incident was bait. but they'd been building the structure since spring. How long does it take to plan the destruction of a marriage? Months, years? Or did she start the day she said, I do? I didn't know anymore. I didn't know which memories were real and which had been staged, which conversations had been genuine and which had been reconnaissance. Alara closed her laptop. We need timeline. Everything. When did Mom actually meet Brent? Not the story she told you, the truth. She said they met at the HOA event in 2022, I said. Summer barbecue, new board member introductions. That's the story, Ilara said. But stories can be checked. Friday morning, Holden Cruz came to the garage carrying a portable hard drive. My dad's backup from 2017, he said. I pulled it from storage like you asked. Took me 3 days to find it, but it's all here. Every email, every file, everything he saved before the business collapsed. I connected the drive to my office computer. Holden had already organized the files by year, then by sender. Look for anything with Brent Ramsey's name, I said, or Clifford Blanchard, or anyone connected to the current LLC. Holden pulled up the email archive, started filtering. The screen filled with results. Here, he said, email thread from June 2017, subject line Marietta Dental Expansion. I read over his shoulder. Brent Ramsey discussing a commercial property opportunity with Clifford Blanchard. Talking about financing. Talking about LLC structure. Talking about a dental clinic expansion that would need contractor work. Then halfway down the thread, a response from a different email address. From Gail Hewitt Dental at domain.com to Brent Ramsey Clifford Blanchard. Subject RE Marietta Dental Expansion. Date June 14th, 2017. The message was short, professional. Gail confirming she could provide facility specifications and contractor referrals for the dental expansion project Brent was planning. June 14th, 2017. My dad saved everything, Holden said quietly. I didn't think a 7-year-old dental email would matter. 2017, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. She told me she met Brent at the HOA meeting in 2022. Holden looked at the screen, at the date, at the sender address. That's a 5-year head start on whatever they're doing to you, he said. I clicked on the email properties. Checked the metadata. The digital fingerprint that proved when a message was sent from where and whether it had been altered. Authentic, unaltered. Sent June 14th, 2017. At 2:47 p.m. from an IP address registered to the dental clinic where Gail worked. 5 years before the HOA barbecue, where she'd shaken Brent's hand like they were strangers meeting for the first time. I stared at the 2017 timestamp, and for a moment I was back at that HOA meeting, watching Gail shake Brent's hand like strangers meeting for the first time, every smile, every introduction a lie. I'd been standing right there, 3 feet away, watching her extend her hand, watching him take it, watching them exchange the kind of polite small talk neighbors make when the HOA president introduces the new board member. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the neighborhood. Looking forward to working together? All of it theater. All of it scripted. Because they'd known each other for 5 years. Because they'd exchanged emails about dental expansion projects. Because whatever relationship they had went back to at least 2017. And the HOA introduction was just performance for people like me who were supposed to believe it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Found the folder from summer 2022. The HOA barbecue. Alara had been visiting that weekend. She'd taken pictures of the new board members being introduced. There it was, 7th photo in the album. Gail in the background, right side of frame, shaking hands with Brent Ramsey, both of them smiling. Professional. Polite. Strangers being introduced by the HOA president. Except now I knew they'd known each other for 5 years. That handshake wasn't a greeting. It was a performance. And I'd been standing there watching it, believing every second of it, not knowing I was watching two people pretend to meet for the first time when they'd been coordinating since at least 2017. I placed the LLC filing on the kitchen counter at 8 p.m. Saturday, the paper landing with a soft sound that cut through 32 years of marriage like a blade. The handshake had been a performance. The 2022 HOA introduction where Gail met Brent for the first time, except she'd known him since at least 2017. 5 years of emails and coordination hidden behind one stage moment of polite small talk. If that was theater, what else had been scripted? Gail was at the sink washing dishes. She glanced at the paper, then at me. She didn't pick it up. Didn't need to. She already knew what it said. 40%, I said. You own 40% of the company trying to steal my garage. She set down the dish she was holding, dried her hands on a towel, turned to face me fully. You were supposed to retire 2 years ago, Les. 2 years ago, 2023, when she'd started talking about how hard I was working, how I'd earned rest, how we had enough saved that I could step back, let someone else run the garage, enjoy our 60s together. I'd thought she was being supportive, caring about my health, about our future. This was supposed to be easier, she continued. Her voice was level, calm, like she was explaining a business decision. You were supposed to just let go, sell the garage, retire, move on to the next phase. And if I didn't, then we had to make it happen differently. How long, I asked. How long have you been planning this? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, Does it matter? Gail didn't argue, didn't deny, didn't even look surprised. And somehow that silence was louder than any confession could be. She picked up her purse from the counter. I'm staying at my parents' tonight. We can talk about the separation agreement when you're ready to be rational. She walked out. I heard her car start, the garage door open and close, then silence. I stood in the kitchen with the LLC filing that proved my wife had been planning to steal my business for at least 2 years, possibly longer. And the only thing I could think was she'd been talking about retirement since 2023. Every conversation about taking it easy, every suggestion that I deserved rest, every mention of how we could travel, spend time together, live differently, all of it had been set up. All of it had been moving me toward the decision to sell. And when I didn't make that decision on my own, they'd built a machine to force it. Monday morning, Clifford Blanchard pulled into the garage lot at 9:15. I was in Bay 2 working on a brake inspection when Holden came to get me. Someone's here to see you, says it's about a business matter. Clifford stood beside a black Mercedes in the parking area. He was holding a manila envelope. Mr. Hewitt, he said. Professional. Polite. Like we were colleagues conducting normal business. I'm here on behalf of Marietta Property Solutions, LLC. We'd like to present a formal acquisition offer for your property and business operations. He held out the envelope. I didn't take it. You can set it on the bench, I said, gesturing to the work table near the garage entrance. Clifford hesitated. Then he walked to the bench and set down the envelope. The offer is $2.1 million for the commercial property at 1847 Polk Street and all associated business assets. The offer is valid for 48 hours from the time of delivery. After that, we will pursue other remedies. $2.1 million. Conrad had estimated the garage and land were worth closer to $3.8 million. They were offering 40% below market value. Holden stood beside me, arms crossed, watching. That's 40% below what your place is worth, he said after Clifford got in his car and drove away. I know, I said. My phone rang. Conrad Mercer. Did Clifford Blanchard just deliver an acquisition offer? Conrad asked. How did you know? Because that's the next step. The 48-hour deadline. Do not sign anything, Mr. Hewitt. Not a receipt. Not an acknowledgement form. Not even a text message confirmation that you received the offer. Any signature could be construed as acceptance or agreement in court. How many documents had I signed over the years without reading every word? Trusting the person handing me the pen, how many times had I scrawled my name on delivery slips, service agreements, routine paperwork because it was easier than reading 3 pages of legal language? The conspirators knew that. They were counting on it. One signature, one moment of inattention, one receipt signed out of habit, and they'd argue I'd accepted their terms. They're setting traps, Conrad continued. Every document is a potential weapon. Every piece of paper they hand you is designed to create legal ambiguity they can exploit. The 48-hour window is pressure. They want you to sign something, anything, while you're under stress. What if I don't sign? Then they escalate. But at least you'll still own your property when they do. I hung up and walked back into the garage. The manila envelope sat on the bench where Clifford had left it. I didn't touch it, didn't open it, just left it there. Holden looked at it, then at me. You going to read it? Eventually, but I'm not signing anything. Not for 48 hours, not for 48 days, not until I understand every word and every trap they've hidden in it. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. 46 hours remaining. I stood in the garage holding Clifford's unsigned offer on the bench beside me, staring at my phone screen. The countdown had started. 46 hours. Someone was tracking the deadline to the minute. One signature, one slip, one moment of inattention in the next 48 hours could hand them everything I'd built over 19 years. The garage, the land, the business, All of it gone because I signed a receipt or acknowledged delivery or confirmed I'd received their offer. They'd built a legal trap so sophisticated that even accepting their paperwork could be twisted into agreement. The text arrived at 3:17 in the morning. Not from Harold, not from Dolores. An unlisted number, just 6 words, 46 hours remaining. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark phone screen glowing like a threat and understood exactly what they'd built, a countdown. A trap sprung not with violence, but with waiting. I didn't sleep after that. By 8, I was in Conrad's office, the text forwarded, my hands shaking around a coffee I couldn't drink. They're going to send something, I said. Something I have to sign, something that looks routine but isn't. Conrad studied the message. FedEx, probably. Express envelope, signature required. He leaned back. Here's what you do, refuse delivery. Everything. For the next 2 days, you sign nothing. What if it's legitimate? Then it waits. Nothing in your life is more urgent than not falling into whatever they've prepared. The envelope came at 11:30. I watched through the window as the FedEx truck pulled up, driver scanning a thick express package. I met him at the door before he could ring the bell. Lester Hewitt. That's me. He turned the scanner toward me. Sign here. I'm refusing delivery. He blinked. Sir, it's already paid for. Just needs your signature. I understand. I'm refusing it. He looked at the package like I'd rejected a winning lottery ticket, made a note on his scanner, and left. I watched him drive away, my heart hammering. 44 hours remaining. Dolores called at 2. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail voice dripping concern. Lester, I'm worried about you. The partners asked me to send over a wellness check form. Standard procedure when someone's under stress. Just a few questions about how you're feeling, whether you need support. It's in your email. Please fill it out and return it by end of day. We care about you. I pulled up the email. Employee wellness assessment in the subject line. A PDF attachment. Please print complete sign and scan back to HR. Right there on the signature line in 8-point font, I hereby authorize Harper and Stokes to share this assessment with relevant stakeholders and waive confidentiality as needed to ensure appropriate care. Relevant stakeholders, appropriate care, legal ammunition wrapped in compassion. I deleted the email. Harold called at 4:58, 2 minutes before close of business. 2 minutes before the 48-hour countdown would cross into its second day. I stared at his name on my screen, thinking about Conrad's warning about every word being recorded, about traps built from apologies. I answered, Lester. His voice was different, smaller. I need to say something, and I need you to just listen. Silence. I'm sorry. The words came out rough. What I said at the conference, what I implied about your marriage, about Gail. It was cruel. It was wrong. You've been nothing but a mentor to me, and I repaid that with gossip and innuendo. I can't take it back, but I need you to know I regret it deeply. I closed my eyes. Every instinct screamed that this was performance. Dolores coaching him, Harold following a script designed to sound unrehearsed. But underneath the suspicion lived something older, the memory of training him, trusting him, believing he might be different. Thank you, I said, nothing more. He exhaled. I know you probably hate me. I just needed you to hear it. The call ended. I sat there thinking about timing, about a wellness form in a FedEx envelope, and an apology all arriving in a 6-hour window. All of it designed to wear me down, to make me sign something, agree to something, trust something. Conrad called at 6:30. It's done. What's done? Everything. I filed 1 hour ago. Divorce petition, civil conspiracy complaint against Dolores Harold and Gail, criminal referral to the state bar for fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. My breath stopped. All of it at once. Simultaneous filing. They've been building a case against you for months. Now they're defendants in 3 separate actions, and every communication they've had about you is potentially discoverable evidence in a criminal investigation. When do they find out? They already have. Process server hit all 3 within a 2-hour window. Dolores at the office at 4:45, Harold at his apartment at 5:30, Gail at her dental clinic at 6:15. I thought about Harold's call. 4:58. 13 minutes before he was served. Had he known, had the apology been his last move, before Conrad's strategy detonated everything? How did they react? Dolores called her attorney before the server left the building. Harold signed and closed the door. But Gail... Conrad paused. The receptionist said she read the first page, stood up, and walked out of the clinic. Left her purse? Left her keys? Just walked out into the parking lot. Where is she now? Nobody knows. She's not answering her phone. Her car's still at the clinic. I stood at my window, looking out at the street where the FedEx truck had been 7 hours ago. Somewhere out there, Gail was walking, or sitting, or planning. The woman I'd been married to for 19 years, served with divorce papers, and conspiracy charges, vanished into the spring evening without her purse or keys. I thought about the countdown text. 34 hours remaining. But remaining until what I'd refused their envelope, deleted their form, survived their apology. Conrad had filed first, struck, first turned their conspiracy into evidence. So why did it feel like the trap hadn't sprung yet? Why did it feel like Gail walking away was exactly what they'd planned for? Gail came home Thursday night. No explanation, no apology. She walked through the door at 11, picked up her purse from the hall table where someone had delivered it, and went upstairs without a word. I didn't ask. The conspiracy had fractured the moment Conrad filed, and whatever she'd been planning during those missing hours no longer mattered. She was served. She was a defendant. The rest was silence. Brent Ramsey's silver Lexus pulled into the garage lot Friday at 3:45. I was in the office reviewing parts invoices when Holden knocked on the doorframe. "Boss, you got a visitor, the guy from the country club." I looked through the window. Brent stepped out of the Lexus, wearing a tailored gray suit and sunglasses, scanning the lot like he was surveying property he already owned. I walked out to meet him. "Lester." He didn't offer his hand. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About ending this before it gets worse for everyone." He glanced around the yard at the lifts and the tool racks and the customer vehicles waiting for service. "You've built something here. 19 years. It would be a shame to lose it." "I'm not losing anything." "You are if you don't accept the settlement offer and withdraw those lawsuits." His voice stayed calm, reasonable. "Right now, you're the victim. Keep pushing and you become the problem. The desperate ex-husband making accusations he can't prove. The small business owner who can't let go." "Is that a threat?" It's reality." He took a step closer. "Drop the filings. Take the offer. Walk away with your reputation intact. Otherwise, you'll lose everything, the garage, your name, all of it." I looked past him to the 6 corners of the lot. New cameras installed 3 weeks ago after someone had tampered with my dash cam. High definition. Audio enabled. All of them recording. "See those 6 cameras?" I pointed to each one in turn. "Everyone upgraded after someone messed with my dash cam footage. They just recorded every word you said." Brent's expression shifted. The confident mask cracked. He turned slowly, counting the camera positions, calculating. "That's witness intimidation," I said. "Criminal evidence. High-definition video with clean audio. You just handed Conrad everything he needs to strengthen the DA's case." He stared at me for 3 seconds. Then he pulled off his sunglasses, and I saw something I'd never seen in Brent Ramsey before. Fear. "This conversation never happened," he said. He got back in the Lexus and drove away without another word. Holden appeared at my shoulder. "You get all that?" "Every frame." For 6 months, Brent had been the hunter and I'd been the prey. But the garage lot cameras flipped the equation in 30 seconds. And now the hunter was on film making threats he couldn't take back. Monday morning, Conrad called at 7. "Roxanne Fleming's attorney reached out. She wants to cooperate." "Why?" "She's the registered agent for the LLC. If the DA pursues criminal charges, she's facing fraud, conspiracy, maybe RICO. Her attorney's smart. He knows cooperation is the only card she has." "What does she have?" "Everything. The full digital communication chain, texts, emails, meeting notes. She's been documenting the conspiracy since August." I met Conrad at the DA's office at 9. Roxanne was already there, seated across from a prosecutor named Andrea Voss, looking smaller than I remembered. She'd always carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew everyone's secrets. Now she looked like someone who'd just realized her own secrets were about to be exposed. "Ms. Fleming has agreed to provide full cooperation," Voss said, "in exchange for immunity from prosecution." Conrad opened his briefcase. "She has access to the complete communication structure, dates, amounts, every participant." Roxanne slid a thumb drive across the table. "Emails going back to July, text threads, meeting recordings. I kept everything." "Why?" I asked. She looked at me directly for the first time. "Because I've seen what happens when these things fall apart. Someone always takes the fall. I wasn't going to be that person." Voss plugged the drive into her laptop. Files populated the screen. Hundreds of them. "This is substantial." "There's something else," Roxanne said. "Something that gave me the final push to come forward." Conrad leaned forward. "What?" "Brent promised me a 15% commission on the garage acquisition. That was the deal." 15% of the property value once the transfer completed. And she pulled a printed document from her folder, the LLC filing Conrad had obtained weeks ago. She pointed to the equity distribution table. The official filing lists me at 5%, not 15.5. I stared at the numbers. They defrauded you. They stole from me the same way they were stealing from you. Her voice stayed level, but I heard the anger underneath. I helped them build this, and they shortchanged me by 10% on a $7 million fraud. How much does loyalty cost when you discover your co-conspirators shortchanged you by 10% on a $7 million fraud? For Roxanne Fleming, the answer was clear: not enough to face criminal prosecution. Voss reviewed the files on the screen, clicking through folders. This is enough for multiple felony charges. Conspiracy fraud, wire fraud if any communications crossed state lines. She's giving you everything, Conrad said. Full cooperation, full testimony. Every participant, every communication, every dollar. Roxanne signed the cooperation agreement at 10:30. As Conrad gathered his papers, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then showed it to me. An unknown number. 6 words: Roxanne talks, 3 more follow. Stop this. Conrad looked at Voss. The conspirators know someone's flipped. And they're panicking, Voss said. I stared at the message. Somewhere out there, the people who'd tried to destroy me were scrambling, calling each other, calculating who might break next, realizing that the fraud they'd built together was collapsing inward. 3 more follow. The question wasn't who breaks first anymore. It was who breaks next. Conrad traced the anonymous text within 48 hours. A burner phone purchased cash at a convenience store in Newark. Dead end. But it didn't matter anymore. Roxanne had already given the DA everything. The warning came too late to stop what was already in motion. Thursday evening, I stood before 80 HOA members in the community hall where 6 months ago they'd voted to restrict my access to shared amenities. The same people who'd crossed the street to avoid me. The same neighbors who'd whispered when Alara walked past. Tonight, they sat in silence as I set up the projector. I'm here to show you what actually happened, I said. Not what you were told. What the evidence proves. I started with the email. June 2017. Gail to Brent Ramsey discussing quarterly portfolio adjustments and referencing their ongoing professional relationship. The timestamp clear. The subject line mundane. The implications devastating. This email is dated 5 years before my wife claimed she and Brent Ramsey met at a charity event. 5 years before she introduced him as a new financial advisor. They had a business relationship long before our marriage showed any cracks. I moved to the next slide. The audit log metadata from the Harper and Stokes system showing deliberate evidence tampering. The dashcam footage documentation timeline. The LLC filing listing. Gail Elizabeth Hewitt as 40% equity holder in an entity created to acquire my business assets. This wasn't an affair that led to opportunism, I said. This was a conspiracy that required an affair as cover. Halfway through the presentation, someone in the 4th row stood. Lauren Hutchins, mid-30s, the elementary school teacher I'd been accused of harassing at the June pool party. She'd avoided eye contact with me for 6 months. Now she was standing in front of the entire community. I need to say something. Her voice shook but held. Lester never harassed me. What happened that day at the pool, it wasn't what people said it was. I was told to stay quiet. Told there would be consequences if I contradicted the story. The room went silent. Who told you that? Someone asked. Brent Ramsey and others. She looked at me directly. I'm sorry I didn't say this sooner. I was scared, but you deserve the truth. She sat down. The silence stretched. Then someone in the back started clapping. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough. I watched 80 neighbors who'd crossed the street to avoid me for 6 months now stare at the evidence in silence. Vindication tastes nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't triumph. It was exhaustion mixed with relief, and the bitter knowledge that belief is easier to destroy than rebuild. Afterward, Alara walked with me to the car. They believed the lie for 6 months, she said. Took you 10 minutes with evidence to show them the truth. Evidence they could have asked for any time. People don't ask, they assume. Friday afternoon, I met Keith at his notary office downtown. My brother, 3 years older, who'd handled our father's estate when he died in 2019. Keith had called that morning about the trust fund, the one our father established decades ago that I'd never accessed. You need to see this, Keith said, sliding a folder across his desk. Inside investment statements showing $1.8 million in carefully managed funds: bonds, dividend stocks, treasury securities, all held in a trust with my name as sole beneficiary. I knew Dad left something. I said, I didn't know it was this much. There's more. Keith flipped to a document dated 2004. This is the trust amendment he filed 21 years ago. Read Clause 7. I scanned the page. Legal language dense and specific. Then I found it. In the event of marital dissolution, these assets shall remain the sole and separate property of the beneficiary, exempt from any community property claim, and shall not be subject to division, offset, or consideration in any settlement, negotiation, or court proceeding. I read it twice. He wrote this in 2004, 2 years before you got married. I did the math. My father had protected these assets from a divorce that wouldn't happen for another 21 years, from a wife he hadn't met yet, from a conspiracy that wouldn't form until long after he was gone. 1.8 million they can't touch, I said quietly. He saw something, or he was just that careful. Keith leaned back. Either way, he's still protecting you. Alara had driven with me. She'd been sitting quietly in the corner, reading the investment summaries. Now she looked up. Your father died in 2019, 6 years ago, and he put this clause in 15 years before that. She shook her head slowly. He protected you from a threat that didn't exist yet. My father had been gone 6 years, but the clause written in his handwriting felt like a voice from 2004 saying, I can't be there, but I can still protect you. We were gathering the documents when a second page slipped from the back of the folder. Thicker paper. Handwritten note clipped to a typed addendum. Keith picked it up. This is dated 2018, 1 year before our father died. I took the page. The note was in his handwriting, shaky from the illness that would take him a year later. If you're reading this during a divorce, look closer at who suggested the prenup waiver in 2006. The words blurred. I read them again. What prenup waiver? Keith asked. I remembered, vaguely, early in the marriage, Gail suggesting we didn't need the formality of a prenuptial agreement, that it showed distrust, that we were building a life together, not protecting against failure. I'd agreed, signed the waiver, filed it away, and forgot about it. Gail convinced me to waive a prenup, I said. 2006, right after we got married. Keith stared at the note. 19 years ago. Alara came to stand beside me, reading over my shoulder. If she orchestrated that waiver back then she's been planning this since the beginning, I finished. The trust fund protected 1.8 million. But if Gail had been building this conspiracy for 19 years, since before we'd even finished our first year of marriage, then the question wasn't what she wanted. It was how much more I hadn't seen. I spent the weekend searching old file boxes in the garage storage room, found the prenup waiver buried in a folder marked Wedding Documents 2006. Gail's handwriting on a sticky note attached to the signed form, We don't need this between us. 19 years later, that note felt like evidence of premeditation I couldn't prove. Conrad called Monday morning with 3 words that shifted everything. They arrested Brent. I was standing in this garage office, invoice halfway to the filing cabinet, when, 20 minutes ago, at his office, conspiracy to commit fraudulent property transfer and criminal threatening. The surveillance footage from your lot sealed it. I sat down slowly. What about the others? Serena Cooper's in custody. Evidence tampering related to the dashcam metadata. Clifford Blanchard received a summons requiring his testimony. They're treating him as a witness rather than a co-conspirator, probably because he pushed back when he realized what they were doing. And Gail, Conrad paused, the kind of pause that meant the answer was complicated. Your wife is cooperating. The words didn't land at first, then they did. Cooperating how? Full cooperation with the prosecutors. She's providing Brent's timeline, his communications details about who initiated what, in exchange for charge reduction. I press my palm against the desk. She's turning on him. When the conspiracy breaks, they always turn on the ringleader first. Conrad's voice stayed clinical. Roxanne gave us the structure. Your wife is giving us the architect. What does that mean for the divorce? It means she's admitting to everything in the civil complaint to get leverage in the criminal case, which makes our case significantly easier. I hung up and stared at the garage floor through the office window. Holden was rotating tires on a Honda. A customer was waiting in the lobby reading a magazine. The mechanics of a normal Monday happening while the woman I'd been married to for 19 years was sitting in a prosecutor's office describing how the man she'd been conspiring with had orchestrated the whole thing. I'd spent 6 months feeling like the system ignored me. Now that same system was putting my accusers in handcuffs and the vindication felt less like victory than exhaustion. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. The garage was closed. Alara came to the apartment behind the shop just after 6, carrying a manila folder I'd never seen before. "I need to show you something," she said. "I've been carrying this alone for 4 months." She set the folder on the kitchen table. Inside, printed emails. A chain of correspondence dated June 2025. Gail's name in the sender field. The recipient, Margaret Cross, attorney at Law, Family Incapacity, and Conservatorship Practice. I read the subject line, "Inquiry regarding spousal competency evaluation." My hands went cold. The first email was clinical, professional. Gail asking about the legal process for declaring a spouse mentally incompetent to manage their own affairs. The attorney's response outlined the steps: medical evaluation, psychiatric assessment, court petition, emergency hearing. Gail's follow-up was more specific. "If my husband's age and recent stress levels can be documented by medical professionals as affecting his judgment, what timeline would we be looking at for establishing conservatorship?" I read it again, then a third time. "She was going to have me declared incompetent," I said. Alara nodded. "Complete control of your assets, the garage, the accounts, everything. You'd be legally unable to make your own decisions." "When did you find this?" "September. I was helping move some of her files when she was out looking for evidence we could use. I found this buried in a personal folder on her laptop." September. 4 months ago. Before Conrad filed the lawsuits. Before the arrests. Before the 48-hour countdown. "Why didn't you show me?" She looked at me directly. "Because if I'd shown you during the 48 hours, it would have crushed you. You needed to stay focused, stay methodical. If you'd known they were planning to have you declared incompetent to erase your ability to fight back, it would have broken something. How much weight can a 25-year-old daughter carry alone, knowing her mother planned to have her father declared incompetent and choosing silence to protect his ability to fight?" "You waited until I'd already won," I said quietly. Alara's eyes were wet. "I waited until you were safe, until the conspiracy was exposed, and the arrests were made, and you couldn't be hurt by knowing." I pulled her into a hug. She held on tight, and I realized she'd been carrying this burden in silence while watching me navigate every threat, every deadline, every trap. She'd been running her own counter-strategy, protecting me from knowledge that might have destroyed my ability to defend myself. "I'm sorry you had to do that alone," I said. "I'm not." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You taught me how to think strategically, how to protect what matters. This is what mattered." I read the email chain again. The attorney's final response stood out. "If incompetence is established by medical evaluation, emergency conservatorship can be granted within 72 hours, giving the petitioner full legal authority over financial and personal decisions." 72 hours. 3 days to erase someone legally, to make them invisible while you dismantled their life. The conspiracy wasn't just about stealing the garage or framing me for harassment or running a defamation campaign. It was about erasing me completely, making me legally incompetent to resist, while they transferred everything I'd built into an LLC I had no power to challenge. I thought about the past 6 months. Every time Gail had asked if I was feeling okay. Every suggestion that I seemed stressed, that maybe I should see someone, that the pressure was getting to me. Every moment she'd documented my reactions, my tone, my exhaustion. She'd been building a medical record, establishing a pattern, preparing the evidence for an incompetence petition, and it almost worked. If Conrad hadn't moved fast, if Roxanne hadn't cooperated, if the cameras hadn't caught Brent, if Alara hadn't protected me from this knowledge when I needed to stay sharp. 72 hours. That's how close I'd been to disappearing. The week between Christmas and New Year's, I went back through 6 months of calendar entries. Every doctor's appointment Gail had suggested, every wellness check she'd arranged, every conversation where she'd asked if I was feeling stressed, overwhelmed, not myself. The medical record she'd been building wasn't subtle once I knew to look for it. It was methodical. 2 suitcases and a cardboard box sat by the front door on New Year's morning. I watched from the kitchen as Gail loaded them into a waiting taxi, 32 years of marriage reduced to 3 pieces of luggage. She worked efficiently, no wasted motion, lifting each case into the trunk like she was checking items off the list. She paused at the car door, turned back to look at the house one final time. Her expression was unreadable. Not apologetic, not defiant, just blank. "You really planned all of it," I said from the porch. She didn't turn around. I planned a lot of things that didn't happen the way they were supposed to. Then she got in the taxi and was gone. I stood there for a long time after the car disappeared around the corner, the front door still open, cold air spilling into the house, trying to understand what I was supposed to feel. Relief, anger, grief. All I felt was empty. Later that afternoon, I was putting dishes away when I opened the kitchen drawer where Gail kept the dish towels. Something gold caught the light. Her 10th anniversary ring, the band I'd saved 8 months of inspection fees to buy back in 2015. She'd worn it every day for 11 years. No note, just the ring placed carefully on top of the folded towels. I picked it up, turned it over. The inscription I'd had engraved on the inside, 10 years forevermore. Forever had lasted 22 years total, but she'd kept this ring for 11 of them, and on the day she left, she'd put it in a drawer where I'd find it. Not lost, not forgotten, deliberately placed. I didn't know if it was a rejection of the marriage or an admission of guilt she couldn't verbalize. Maybe both. 32-year don't fit in 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, but the person you thought you married can disappear in the space between a taxi door opening and closing. 5 days later, Harold Sinclair called me at the garage office. It was just after 3. I was reviewing parts orders when his name appeared on my phone screen. I almost didn't answer. Lester. His voice sounded different, smaller, drained of the authority it once carried. Harold, I need to tell you something. Dolores and I were stepping back. From all of it. The case, the family dispute, everything. I set down my pen. Why? Because we should have asked more questions. Before we chose sides. Before we... He trailed off. We should have asked our daughter what was really happening. The silence stretched. I heard him breathing on the other end of the line. She didn't tell us about the incompetence plan, he said finally. We didn't know about that until the prosecutor's office called last week. They're building the full timeline, and they asked us about medical appointments, wellness evaluations. We had no idea. What did you think it was? A property disagreement. A bad marriage ending badly. 2 people fighting over a business. His voice cracked. Not an attempt to have you legally erased. I thought about Harold's apology call. 2 minutes before the deadline. Perfectly timed to sound genuine while potentially being recorded strategy. You called me 2 minutes before the deadline to apologize, I said. That meant something, Harold. I meant it. He was quiet for a moment. Dolores asked me what I would have wanted if someone had said those things about me in front of my colleagues. I didn't have a good answer. How many layers of deception does it take before even your own parents don't recognize the plan you've built? I don't know what happens now, Harold said. Between you and Gail, between us, and... He stopped. I don't know who my daughter is anymore. That's the truth. I thought I raised someone who valued honesty, integrity. The woman who planned what you showed us in that evidence presentation, I don't know her. He sounded like a man grieving a stranger. Someone who looked like his daughter, but had been replaced by someone capable of orchestrating a 19-year conspiracy to destroy her husband. I appreciate you calling, I said. I wish I'd called 6 months ago. Before any of this, Harold cleared his throat. If you ever want to talk, not about the case, just if you need to talk, you have my number. He hung up. I sat in the office looking out at the garage floor. Holden was training a new mechanic on brake pad replacement. A customer was picking up keys at the front counter. Normal operations continuing while the world I'd known for 3 decades finished collapsing. Gail had deceived everyone. Her parents, her lover, her co-conspirators. Even Roxanne and Brent hadn't known about the incompetence strategy. She'd compartmentalized the plan so thoroughly that no single person understood the full scope except her. And maybe that was the point. If no one knew everything, no one could stop it. 2 days after Harold's call, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. Dean Warren, attorney at law. Gail's divorce attorney. I played the message on speaker. Mr. Hewitt, this is Dean Warren representing Gail Hewitt in the dissolution proceedings. We need to discuss settlement terms. My client is prepared to make certain concessions you'll want to hear. Please call me at your earliest convenience to schedule a meeting. Concessions. After everything, after the conspiracy, the defamation, the incompetence, plan, the arrests, after she'd tried to have me legally erased and failed. Now she wanted to negotiate. I saved the voicemail and stared at Dean Warren's callback number on the screen. What could Gail possibly offer? Now that would matter more than the truth she'd already destroyed. What concession could rebuild what she'd spent 19 years planning to dismantle? I didn't know if I wanted to find out. I didn't call Dean Warren back. Instead, I forwarded his voicemail to Conrad with a one-line message, "Handle this." Whatever concessions Gail was offering, I didn't want to hear them from her attorney's polished voice. I wanted documentation, legal language, terms I could study without feeling manipulated. Mid-January. I slid the employment contract across the workbench in Bay 1. Holden Cruz stared at it like he'd never seen his own name in print before. Full-time automotive inspector Hewitt's auto garage salary plus benefits. He picked it up carefully, reading each line. "You're serious. Full-time, salary benefits advancement path. You've earned it 10 times over." Holden had been working at the garage for 8 months, ever since Conrad discovered his father's business had collapsed in the 2017 fraud scheme. He'd started as part-time help and become the most reliable inspector I'd ever trained. Methodical, honest, exactly what his father had been before Brent Ramsey destroyed him. "I need to tell you something," Holden said, still holding the contract. "Something my dad said before he died." I waited. "He never blamed you for not seeing what Brent was doing back in 2017. He knew you didn't have access to the financial side. He said..." Holden's voice caught. "He said you were the only one who treated him like a partner instead of a mark." The words hit harder than I expected. For 9 years, I'd carried the weight of not knowing, not seeing, not stopping the fraud that had destroyed a good man's business and probably contributed to the stroke that killed him 3 years later. "I wish I'd known that before he died," I said quietly. "I wish I could have told him I was sorry." He knew. Holden signed the contract, his signature firm and clear. "He told me if I ever had the chance to work for you, I should take it. Because honest work with honest people is the only thing that lasts." Holden's father had been gone 3 years, but the words he'd left his son about me felt like a hand reaching across time to say you were worth trusting, even when you couldn't see the threat. We shook hands. His grip was strong. His father's grip passed down through a generation that understood the value of work done right. Late January, I sat across from Conrad in his office while he laid out the finalized divorce decree. Alara sat beside me, reading over my shoulder as Conrad walked through each section. "Fault-based dissolution," Conrad said. "Citing adultery and attempted fraudulent asset transfer. You retain full ownership of the garage, the commercial land, and the protected trust fund. All of it. All of it. Total assets valued at $7.2 million. Alara pulled out her phone, opening the calculator. "What was Brent's settlement offer, the one they tried to get you to sign?" Conrad flipped back through his notes. $2.1 million. She typed the numbers, subtracted. Her expression changed. 2.1 versus 7.2. They tried to steal $5.1 million. Conrad nodded. 71% of your net worth. I stared at the decree. The numbers felt abstract. $5 million, 71%. But what made it real was the timeline. The 48-hour countdown. The FedEx envelope I'd refused. The wellness form I'd deleted. Harold's apology, call at 4:58, 2 minutes before the deadline. 48 hours, I said. I was 48 hours from signing it all away. 2 minutes, Alara corrected. Harold called at 4:58. Close of business was 5. If he'd convinced you during that call to sign anything before the deadline passed, they might have had leverage to argue you'd accepted terms under duress, but with awareness. How do you measure the value of 48 hours when the difference between survival and erasure came down to refusing to pick up a pen? The garage alone is worth 4.8 million tests, Conrad continued. The land it sits on another 1.5 million. The trust fund 1.8. Everything you built over 32 years of work. They calculated it down to the dollar and built a conspiracy to transfer 71% of it into an LLC where you had zero equity. I thought about the 2017 email, Gail's professional relationship with Brent starting 5 years before she claimed they'd met. The prenup waiver in 2006, 19 years of groundwork. How long does something like this take to plan? I asked. Conrad closed the folder. In my experience, years. This level of coordination, the LLC setup, the defamation campaign, the incompetence strategy as a backup plan, this wasn't opportunistic. This was architectural. Alara was still looking at her phone calculator. 5.1 million divided by 19 years. That's $268,000 per year of planning. They were patient. They were thorough, Conrad said. But thorough plans fall apart when one piece refuses to cooperate. You were that piece. He pulled one more document from his briefcase. Official letterhead, county courthouse seal, criminal trial date notification, Brent Ramsey and Serena Cooper. March 2026. Conspiracy to commit fraud evidence tampering criminal threatening. I scanned the document. Trial date set for March 23rd. Expected duration 5 to 7 days. Witness list attached. My name was first. At the bottom, a handwritten note in blue ink. We'll need your testimony. Prepare to tell the whole story. A DAM Reyes. The whole story, I said. 6 months compressed into one witness stand, Conrad replied. One oath, one chance to speak the truth in a room where lies can't hide. Alara touched my arm. You ready for that? I thought about everything I'd carried since August. The dashcam discovery, the defamation, the conspiracy's scope revealed piece by piece, the incompetence plan, the near miss with the 48-hour deadline, Gail walking away with 2 suitcases, Harold's broken voice admitting he didn't know his own daughter. All of it would go into the public record. Testimony under oath, cross-examination, the defense trying to discredit me while I explained exactly how they'd tried to erase me. I'm ready, I said, but I wasn't sure if that was true. The resolution wasn't finished until I stood in that courtroom and said it all out loud. I spent 2 weeks preparing my testimony with Conrad. Every detail, every date, every document. When I finally took the stand on March 19th, I spoke for 3 hours straight. The defense attorney tried to rattle me. I stayed methodical. By the time I stepped down, the jury looked exhausted. So was I. The judge read Brent Ramsey's sentence in a Cobb County courtroom on a cold March morning, and the first words I heard clearly were 3 years supervised probation and $380,000 in restitution. I sat in the gallery next to Holden Conrad, on his other side. Ilara was at work, but had asked me to text her the moment the verdicts came through. Brent stood at the defense table in a gray suit, his expression blank. The judge continued, The restitution amount shall be paid to the Cruz family estate for the 2017 fraudulent business transfer that resulted in the collapse of Cruz Automotive Services. Payment terms to be determined by the court-appointed trustee. Holden went very still beside me. I felt him stop breathing for a second. That's almost exactly what my dad lost, he whispered, down to the dollar. I remembered the 2017 audit Conrad had obtained, the LLC trap that had destroyed Holden's father's business 8 years ago, the fraud that had gone unprosecuted because the victim died before he could pursue justice. Now, because this conspiracy had pulled Brent's entire history into the light, that old crime was finally being addressed. The current conspiracy's exposure had delivered justice for a crime nearly a decade old. The judge moved to Serena Cooper, 18 months in county jail for evidence tampering, sentenced to begin immediately. I watched the bailiff step forward. Serena's attorney whispered something to her. She nodded, stood, and held out her wrists. The handcuffs clicked into place with a sound that echoed through the quiet courtroom. Clifford Blanchard wasn't present. His attorney stood alone at a separate table as the judge addressed him. Mr. Blanchard faces a state bar investigation for his role in the 2017 LLC formation and the current conspiracy. This court lacks jurisdiction over professional discipline, but the findings in this case will be forwarded to the State Bar Ethics Committee. Clifford's attorney spoke up. Your Honor, my client disputes any knowledge of criminal conspiracy. He provided legal services in good faith based on information provided by. The bar investigation will determine that, the judge said flatly. This court is satisfied that Mr. Blanchard's actions warrant professional scrutiny. I watched the bailiff lead Serena out of the courtroom in handcuffs and felt nothing like the satisfaction I expected, just exhaustion at how many people chose to destroy me for money they never got. 2 days later, Conrad called with the full list of consequences beyond the criminal sentences. I was in the garage office reviewing a supply order when his name appeared on my screen. Gail accepted a plea deal last week, Conrad said. 2 years probation, permanent criminal record for conspiracy. She lost her position at the dental clinic. They terminated her the day after the verdict. I set down my pen. She cooperated. I thought that would get her immunity. Cooperation gets charge reduction, not erasure. She still committed conspiracy to defraud. The prosecutor was clear cooperation means probation instead of jail time, not a clean slate. What else? Wendy Ashford, the HOA treasurer who falsified your financial documentation, lost her county auditor position. Her supervisor's statement to the court was direct. An auditor who falsifies records cannot remain employed in public trust. She's also facing a $25,000 civil penalty for her role. I vaguely remembered Wendy from HOA meetings. Quiet woman, mid-50s, always took meticulous notes. The kind of person you'd trust with financial oversight because she seemed detail-oriented. Turned out she was detail-oriented just in service of fraud. And the LLC, formally dissolved, all attempted asset transfers voided, the whole structure dismantled. Conrad paused. There's one more thing. I need to call Holden to explain the restitution details. Can you put him on? I walked out to Bay 2, where Holden was finishing an inspection on a Ford Explorer. Conrad needs to talk to you about the restitution. Holden wiped his hands on a shop towel and took my phone. I watched his face as Conrad spoke. Saw his expression shift from confusion to something that looked like grief and gratitude mixed together. I understand, Holden said quietly. Then after a long pause, thank my father. He kept every receipt, every email, every record. He knew someone would need to see the truth someday. How many people keep perfect records of their own destruction? Not knowing those same documents will someday become evidence of someone else's crime and the path to their family's restitution. Holden handed back my phone. His eyes were wet. The restitution amount is based on my dad's 2017 documentation, he said. He kept everything. Every transaction log, every email with Brent, every invoice, every payment record. Conrad said without those files, they couldn't have proved the exact amount Brent stole. Your father was thorough. He died thinking he'd failed, that he'd been stupid for trusting Brent, that he should have seen it coming. Holden's voice broke, but he left the proof. He left the way to make it right. $380,000. That's what Brent took from him in 2017. And now, 9 years later, my family gets it back because my dad kept the receipts. We stood there in the garage bay, the sounds of work continuing around us. Holden crying quietly. Me thinking about a man I'd never really known, who'd been meticulous enough to document his own destruction so thoroughly that it became evidence for future justice. Your father would be proud of you, I said. He'd be proud we both kept records, Holden replied. You with your dash cam, him with his invoices. That's what stopped them. Not speeches, not accusations, just proof. 3 days after the final sentencing, a package arrived at the garage. No return address. Plain brown envelope hand-delivered by courier. Inside a single sheet of dental clinic letterhead. Gail's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before she'd left on New Year's Day. One sentence, I didn't think you'd fight back. No apology, no explanation, just the admission that she'd underestimated me. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and filed it with the rest of the case documents. Even now, after everything, she still didn't understand what she'd destroyed or why I couldn't just let it go. I filed Gail's note with the rest of the case documents in a banker's box in Conrad's office storage room. One sentence admitting she'd underestimated me, preserved alongside depositions and court orders and evidence logs. Documentation of a miscalculation that cost her everything she'd spent 19 years planning. The garage at 6:45 on a Tuesday morning in mid-January felt like it did 30 years ago. Quiet, cold, familiar. And for the first time in 8 months, I didn't check over my shoulder when I unlocked the bay doors. I arrived 15 minutes before Holden, following the rhythm I'd kept for 3 decades. Walk each bay, check yesterday's log entries, prep the day's inspection schedule. The familiar pattern felt like muscle memory, my hands moving through tasks they'd performed thousands of times. I opened a fresh logbook. The conspiracy documentation was filed away with Conrad cross-referenced and archived in case of appeals or future litigation. This book was clean, blank pages waiting for ordinary work. I wrote the first entry in careful block letters. Customer Hayes, year/make 2019. Toyota Camry, service standard oil change and filter replacement. I stared at the words. No metadata, timestamps. No evidence chain notation. No asterisks marking entries for legal review. Just a customer who needed an oil change and a mechanic who'd perform the service and document it in a logbook that would never see the inside of a courtroom. Hayes, Camry, oil change, nothing else, I said to Lamty Bay. After months of documenting conspiracy evidence with forensic precision, this simple entry felt like the best first line I'd ever written in a logbook. This was what normal looked like. This was what I'd been fighting to keep. Holden arrived at 7, carrying 2 coffees from the shop down the street. He handed me one without a word. We stood together in Bay 1, drinking coffee and watching the morning light come through the garage windows. Feels different, he said finally. Good different or strange different? Both. He looked around the garage. 6 months ago, this place felt like it was disappearing. Now it just feels like a garage again. That's all it ever was, I said. We just had to prove it. Sunday afternoon, I drove Elara to Hartsfield Jackson for her return flight. 6 months, she'd paused her life to help me fight. 6 months of research and strategy and carrying burdens I didn't know about until they were over. Now she was going back to her life, the one that existed before dashcams and conspiracies and courtroom testimony. We didn't talk much during the drive. The silence felt comfortable. Everything that needed saying had been said over the past months. At the security checkpoint, she turned to face me. You're really going to be okay, right? Without me checking on you every day. I've been okay, sweetheart. I just didn't know it while I was standing in it. Rebuilding a life after betrayal is like rebuilding an engine after catastrophic failure. You don't get the old one back, but if you're methodical, patient, and honest about what's broken, you can build something that runs clean. She pulled me into a hug, held on tight, then whispered close to my ear, I knew you wouldn't break, Dad. That's why I stayed, because I knew you'd still be standing when it was over. I felt something in my chest loosen. She hadn't been protecting me from collapse. She'd been standing witness to resilience she'd trusted completely, even when I couldn't see it myself. Thank you for believing that, I said. Thank you for proving me right. I watched her disappear through security, carrying half my fight with her. The daughter who'd run a counter strategy to protect me. The 25-year-old who'd withheld evidence of the incompetence plan because she knew timing mattered more than immediate truth. She turned once before the checkpoint waved and was gone. Monday evening, after Holden had gone home and the last customer had picked up their keys, I sat at my father's old desk in the garage office. The surface was scarred from decades of use. Paperwork, coffee stains, the accumulated weight of running a business. I opened my personal log, not the customer service records, but the notebook I'd kept through the whole ordeal. The one Conrad had copied for evidence, but I'd maintained as my own accounting. I documented the complete timeline with the same precision I'd used for a failed brake system. Incident origin. Dashcam footage review. June 14th, 2025. Root cause conspiracy dating to at least 2017, possibly 2006. Escalation pattern. Defamation campaign. June through August. LLC formation. And attempted fraudulent transfer August through December. Incompetence strategy as backup plan June through September. Evidence chain. Metadata. Analysis. Email. Discovery. Cooperation. Agreements. Surveillance footage. Financial documentation. Inspector protocol followed throughout. Chain of custody maintained. Resolution divorce finalized fault-based dissolution. Criminal convictions. Conspiracy evidence. Tampering fraud. Restitution $380,000 to Cruz family estate. Civil penalties. Fraudulent LLC dissolved. Professional licenses revoked. Financial penalties assessed. Total assets retained. Garage property, commercial land, protected trust fund. $7.2 million preserved. 67 years old, and the most important thing I'd learned wasn't about fraud or evidence or legal strategy. It was that documentation tells the truth when everyone else is lying. And sometimes being underestimated is the only advantage you need. At the bottom of the final page, I wrote the lesson learned. They called me an old man who didn't know when to sit down. They were right about the old part, wrong about everything else. Plans built on wrong assumptions don't hold. I closed the logbook, switched off the desk lamp. The office went dark except for the security lights from the garage floor, casting long shadows through the window. I locked the office door behind me and stood in the main garage. 6 inspection bays. Lifts in resting position, tool chests organized and locked, equipment maintained and ready for tomorrow's work. The smell of motor oil and metal and honest labor. They'd tried to erase me, tried to have me declared incompetent, tried to steal everything I'd built over 32 years of methodical documented work. And I was still here. The garage was still here. Holden would arrive at 7 tomorrow morning with 2 coffees. We'd open the bays and service vehicles and write simple entries in clean logbooks. That wasn't survival, that was victory. I turned off the lights and walked to my truck. Didn't look back. Tomorrow was just another day of doing what I'd always done, inspecting vehicles, keeping records, treating people honestly, the same things that saved me when nothing else could. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest advantage you'll ever have. Looking back, I made mistakes. I trusted too completely. I ignored small signs that something was wrong. I let 32 years of marriage blind me to what was being built beneath the surface. Don't make my mistake when someone asks you to waive protections, to skip documentation, to just trust them without verification. That's when you need documentation most. The lesson is simple. Documentation tells the truth when everyone else is lying. Keep records. Save emails. Note dates and times. It feels paranoid until it saves everything you've built. I believe God put me through this to show me that being methodical isn't weakness. It's the strongest defense against people who think elaborate plans can beat simple integrity. What they built in 19 years fell apart in 8 months because truth doesn't need complexity to win. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate if you'd leave a comment telling me what stood out most. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being underestimated isn't a weakness. And if you'd like more stories about resilience and standing your ground, please subscribe. I have more to tell. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One last note, while this story is based on real experiences, certain details have been fictionalized for privacy and storytelling purposes. The lessons remain true. God bless you.